My wife's dad, the CEO, said, "Leave if you want. You'll be back begging within a month," after humiliating me in front of my coworkers. I replied, "Start counting." Then I moved to another city for my dream job and tripled my salary. A few weeks later, we met at a meeting. I'll never forget the weight of silence. Not the comfortable kind, the kind you share with someone you love on a Sunday morning, coffee, steam rising between you like promises. No, this was the silence that comes right before everything you've built decides to crumble. The kind that sits heavy in your chest, that makes the air taste like copper and regret. It was a Tuesday, late March, the kind of evening where spring hasn't quite decided if it's ready to commit, so the air outside held that peculiar chill that makes you question whether you grabbed the right jacket. Inside the restaurant, though, everything was warm. Too warm. The kind of warmth that makes your collar feel tight and your smile feel false. Richard Kane sat across from me, cutting his steak with the precision of a man who'd spent 40 years making decisions that affected thousands of lives. My father-in-law, CEO of Kane Industries. The man whose daughter I'd married 3 years ago in a ceremony that cost more than my parents' house. The man who'd given a speech at our wedding about welcoming me to the family, while his eyes told a different story entirely. "So, David," he said, not looking up from his plate, "Melissa tells me you're still in that, what do you call it, junior management position?" My wife, his daughter, shifted beside me. I felt her hand find mine under the table. A small squeeze that said, "I'm sorry, and please don't, and I love you all at once." Melissa had her mother's kindness and her father's spine. It was one of the things I loved most about her. But even steel bends under enough pressure. "Mid-level operations manager," I corrected, keeping my voice steady. "I've been there 4 years now. Good company. Good people. Mid-level." Richard repeated the words like they tasted bad. At 32. The silence that followed wasn't a question. It was a judgment rendered. Sentenced, passed, case closed. "Richard." Melissa's mother, Catherine, touched his arm. Her voice had that gentle warning tone that comes from 3 decades of marriage. "David's doing well. They promoted him just last year." Promoted to middle management. Fascinating. Richard finally looked at me, and I saw it then. That particular expression I'd seen dozens of times in 3 years of family dinners, holiday gatherings, birthday parties. It wasn't quite contempt. It was worse. It was disappointment. Not the disappointed but proud of you kind. The disappointed and wondering why my daughter settled kind. I'd like to tell you I said something brilliant. That I defended myself with the kind of articulate fury that makes people stand and applaud. But the truth is, I just sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. "Dad," Melissa said, and her voice had an edge now. "Can we not do this tonight?" "Do what?" "I'm simply taking an interest in my son-in-law's career." "Is that not allowed?" If you've ever been in a conversation where every word is a trap, you know the feeling. Like walking through a minefield, where even silence might trigger an explosion. I set my fork down carefully. "I appreciate your interest, Richard. The position is challenging, but I enjoy it. The team I manage is... What's the salary?" He cut me off with the casual cruelty of someone who'd learned long ago that money was the most efficient weapon. "If you don't mind me asking." I did mind. God, I minded. But Melissa's hand was still in mine, and Catherine was looking at me with those apologetic eyes, and the restaurant was full of people who didn't need to hear this conversation get ugly. "It's comfortable," I said. "Comfortable." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You know what I told Melissa when she said she was going to marry you?" I said, "Sweetheart, love is lovely, but comfortable won't pay for the life you're used to." "Richard!" Catherine's voice was sharp now. "What?" "I'm being honest. David, you seem like a nice young man. You really do. But nice doesn't build dynasties. Nice doesn't create generational wealth. Nice doesn't... Dad, stop. Melissa pulled her hand from mine to grip the table edge. This is exactly why we don't come to these dinners anymore. Don't be dramatic. I'm simply pointing out that your husband, at his age, with his education, should be doing better. Much better. Unless... He paused, let the silence stretch just long enough to hurt. Unless he's simply not capable of better. There it was. The thing that had been lurking beneath every interaction for 3 years. Finally, dragged into the light. Not capable. Not good enough. Not worthy of his daughter. I should have stood up. Should have thrown my napkin down and walked out. Should have done a lot of things. Instead, I heard myself say, I'm working on a project right now that could change that. Why did I say it? Pride? Desperation? The desperate need to prove something to this man who'd never believed in me? Maybe all three. Maybe none. Maybe I was just tired of being looked at like I was a mistake his daughter had made that he was too polite to correct. A project. Richard's eyebrows rose. Do. Tell. Do. 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 Tell. And I did. God help me, I did. I told him about the operational efficiency proposal I'd been developing. 6 months of research, analysis, late nights at the office, a comprehensive plan to streamline 3 departments, reduce redundancy, save the company millions annually while improving employee satisfaction and output. I told him about the metrics, the projections, the presentation I was preparing for the executive board. I told him everything. He listened, actually listened. And when I finished, he was nodding slowly, that same calculating look he probably wore in boardrooms when evaluating acquisition targets. Impressive, he said, and for just a moment, I thought maybe, I'd finally broken through. Who's your CEO? I know him. I'll put in a word. Really? The hope in my voice made me hate myself a little. Of course. Can't have my son-in-law languishing in middle management forever. Bad for the family image. He smiled. Email me the details. Tomorrow. I'll make some calls. Melissa was staring at her father with something between suspicion and cautious optimism. Catherine looked relieved. And me? I felt like I'd just won something. Finally, after 3 years of polite contempt, I'd earned Richard Kane's respect. If you've ever been betrayed, you'll know there's a moment right before it happens where everything feels possible, where you let your guard down just enough to hope, where you believe that maybe, just maybe, things are going to be okay. I bought dinner that night, insisted on it. Richard tried to argue, but I'd already handed my card to the waiter. It was a small thing, meaningless really, but it felt like taking back some dignity, some power. Thank you for tonight, I told him as we left the restaurant, for believing in the project. It means a lot. Family takes care of family, he said, shaking my hand with that firm CEO grip that probably sealed million-dollar deals. Send me that email first thing tomorrow. I sent it at 6 a.m. the next morning. Every detail, every projection, every piece of research I'd compiled. 6 months of work, distilled into 15 pages of the best professional writing I'd ever produced. He responded within an hour. Received. Will be in touch. That was Tuesday. By Thursday morning, I was sitting in my manager's office, watching him read something on his computer screen with an expression that made my stomach drop. David, he said slowly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Did you share your efficiency proposal with anyone outside the company? The world tilted slightly. My father-in-law, he's a CEO. He offered to put in a good word with Richard Kane? My manager's face had gone pale. You sent Richard Kane our operational details? Our financial projections? Our proprietary process documentation? He said he knew our CEO. He said he'd help. David. My manager closed his laptop. Richard Kane is currently in negotiations to acquire our company. Has been for 3 months. This is confidential information, but you need to know. You just handed our competitor detailed intelligence on our operational vulnerabilities. I stopped breathing. I want to tell you that it couldn't have been that bad, that there was some misunderstanding. That Richard Kane, family man, father to my wife, wouldn't have deliberately manipulated his son-in-law into corporate espionage. But my manager's face told me everything I needed to know. The executive team is meeting this afternoon, he continued. I'm required to report this. I don't. David, I don't think I can protect you from this. I drove home in a daze. Called Melissa. She didn't answer. Sent her a text. Need to talk. It's important. She responded with, at my parents'. Dad's here for lunch. Join us? Of course he was. When I walked into my in-laws' house, the house I'd been welcomed into 3 years ago, the house where I'd carved turkey at Thanksgiving and wrapped Christmas presents and pretended to be part of a family that had never quite accepted me, Richard was sitting at the head of the dining table, reading the newspaper. He looked up when I entered, smiled. David, Melissa said you were coming by. Perfect timing. We were just about to... What did you do? My voice sounded strange, distant. I'm sorry. My manager called me in this morning. Apparently you're trying to acquire my company. Apparently the information I gave you, the information you asked for, is now being used against them in negotiations. The silence that followed was different from the restaurant silence. This one had teeth. Richard set down his newspaper with careful precision. David, I'm a businessman. You sent me information about your company's operations. I evaluated that information. That's what I do. I sent it to you because you offered to help me. And I did help you. I taught you a valuable lesson about trust in business. They're not the same thing. Melissa appeared in the doorway, her face confused. David? What's going on? Your father manipulated me into giving him confidential company information. I'm probably going to be fired. Might be sued. I don't. My voice cracked. I don't even know if what I did was legal. Dad? Melissa looked at her father. Is this true? I asked your husband about his work. He volunteered information. If he lacked the judgment to understand the implications, that's not my responsibility. You knew I didn't know about the acquisition. You knew I was trying to impress you. You used that. Richard stood. He wasn't a tall man, but he had the presence of someone who'd spent decades being the most important person in every room. David, let me be very clear. You are in a mid-level position at a second-rate company because you lack the strategic thinking necessary for real success. This situation merely confirms what I've known since the day you met my daughter. You're not operating at the level required for this family. Richard. Catherine had appeared now too, her hand over her mouth. If you want to play in the big leagues, Richard continued, you need to understand that sentiment has no place in business. I gave you an opportunity to prove yourself. You failed. That's not my fault. I looked at Melissa. She was staring at her father like she'd never seen him before. Melissa, Richard said, his voice softer now. Sweetheart, you know I only want what's best for you. This man cannot provide the life you deserve. He cannot protect you. He cannot. Get out. Her voice was quiet. Melissa, get out. Louder now. This is my house. That you bought. That you never let me forget you bought. Get out of my house. Richard's face hardened. I see. Well, when this little tantrum is over, and you realize what you've married into, the door is always open. But David, he turned to me. You won't last a month. Whatever you think you're going to do, wherever you think you're going to go, you'll be back, begging, because men like you always come back. Dad, within a month, Melissa, I guarantee it, he'll come crawling back, asking for a job, asking for money, asking for mercy. And then you'll see exactly what I've been trying to tell you for 3 years. The silence after he left was absolute. I was fired the next day, escorted from the building by security. 3 years of work, gone. My reputation in the industry, damaged. My marriage, strained. My confidence, shattered. But here's the thing about rock bottom. There's nowhere to go but up, or sideways, or completely off the grid to rebuild yourself from scratch. I spent the weekend in a fog. Melissa barely spoke to me. Not because she blamed me. I think she was just processing the fact that her father had deliberately sabotaged her husband's career as some kind of twisted lesson in business acumen. Sunday night, as I sat on our couch staring at the wall, my phone rang. Unknown number. David Chen. The voice was professional, female, vaguely familiar. Speaking. This is Jennifer Walsh. We met at the Operations Management Conference last fall. You sat in on my panel about strategic restructuring. I remembered. She was a VP at TechCore, a massive company 3 states away. We'd talked briefly after her panel. She'd seemed impressed by my questions. I remember. Hi. I heard about what happened at your company. Word travels fast in our industry. She paused. I also heard about why it happened. My stomach tightened. Richard Kane is known for this kind of thing. Brilliant businessman. Absolute shark. No one who knows him would fault you for what happened. He's notorious for manipulating people. Another pause. How would you feel about a fresh start? Different city? Different company? Different everything? I what? We have an opening for a senior director of operations. It's a new position, essentially building out a department from scratch. I remembered your questions at the conference, your insights. I pulled up some of your published work. David, you're exactly what we're looking for. And frankly, I'd rather hire someone I know Richard Kane sees as a threat than someone he approved of. The words weren't computing. I was just fired. For being manipulated by one of the most ruthless CEOs in the industry. Not exactly a black mark from where I'm sitting. She named a salary. I almost dropped the phone. It was 3 times what I'd been making. Interested? I looked at Melissa. She was watching me from the doorway. Her eyes red from crying, but her jaw set in that way that reminded me so much of her father, that steel spine that ran through the Kane family, even the ones who used it for good instead of evil. When would I start? I asked. And Jennifer Walsh laughed. How soon can you get to Denver? I gave my answer on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the restaurant dinner that changed everything. I said yes, but first, I had one call to make. Richard Kane answered on the 3rd ring. Start counting, I said. Then I hung up. The thing about making life-changing decisions is that they feel simultaneously too fast and not fast enough. Too fast, because 3 days after Jennifer Walsh's phone call, I was signing a contract that would move me 1,200 miles away from everything I knew. Not fast enough, because those same 3 days felt like swimming through concrete, every hour stretching into days as I navigated the aftermath of what Richard Kane had done. Melissa and I talked. God, did we talk? It was Tuesday night. Seems like Tuesdays were becoming significant in my life, and we sat on our bedroom floor, backs against the bed, a bottle of wine between us that neither of us was really drinking. The kind of conversation where you're not looking at each other, because eye contact would make it all too real, too immediate, too painful. Denver, she said. Not a question, just the word, hanging there like a challenge. Denver. I confirmed. That's far. It is. She was quiet for a long moment, turning her wine glass in her hands. The light from our bedside lamp caught the gold of her wedding ring, the ring her father had insisted on paying for, the ring that probably cost more than most people's cars. The ring that suddenly felt like a shackle connecting her to a family legacy I could never escape. "I can't believe he did this," she said finally. Her voice was small. Melissa was never small. "I can't believe my own father deliberately sabotaged you, manipulated you, used me, used our marriage as leverage to prove some sick point about business and worthiness." And she stopped, her breath catching. I reached for her hand, found it, held it. "The job is good, Mel. Better than good. It's the kind of opportunity people wait their entire careers for. Senior director. Building a department from scratch. They're giving me autonomy, resources, a team. The salary alone is... I don't care about the salary." She turned to look at me then, and her eyes were fierce. "I care about you, about us, about the fact that my father's cruelty is forcing us to choose between your career and our life here. Is it forcing us, though? Or is it freeing us?" The question sat between us like a third presence. Because that was the truth neither of us wanted to say out loud. Maybe this was the escape hatch we'd needed all along. Maybe 3 years of family dinners where I was never quite good enough, 3 years of subtle jabs and disappointed looks, and Richard Kane's particular brand of emotional warfare disguised as concern, maybe all of that had been slowly suffocating us both. "Come with me," I said. "David, come with me. Fresh start. New city. No more family dinners where your father spends 2 hours explaining why I'm not worthy of you. No more walking on eggshells. No more..." I stopped, trying to find the right words. "No more feeling like I'm failing you just by being myself." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "You've never failed me. Your father thinks I have. My father is a cruel, manipulative bastard who mistakes money for character and power for love." Her voice was shaking. "And I'm so angry at him I can barely breathe. But David, Denver, that's my whole life. My job, my friends, my mother." "Your mother who stood by while your father destroyed me?" It was cruel. I knew it was cruel the moment the words left my mouth. But I was tired. So tired. Tired of being understanding. Tired of being patient. Tired of being the bigger person while Richard Kane used me as a punching bag to prove whatever point he needed to prove about strength and success and the way the world really works. Melissa flinched. She didn't know what he was doing. Didn't she? "Mel, your father doesn't make moves like this without discussing them with your mother first. They've been married 30 years. You really think she had no idea he was planning to acquire my company? That he was setting me up?" The silence that followed was terrible. Because we both knew I was right. Catherine Kane was kind, yes. Gentle, yes. But she'd been married to Richard long enough to know exactly who he was and how he operated. And she'd said nothing. Done nothing. Watched her husband humiliate her son-in-law over steak and red wine, and stayed silent. "I need time," Melissa said finally. "How much time?" "I don't know. A week? 2 weeks? David, you're asking me to leave my entire life behind because my father is a monster. That's not fair." She was right. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. But fairness wasn't going to pay our bills, or rebuild my career, or erase the fact that I'd been escorted out of my office by security guards while my former colleagues watched. Fairness wasn't going to give me back the 3 years I'd spent trying to earn the approval of a man who'd never intended to give it. "I start in 2 weeks," I said. "Jennifer needs me in Denver to begin the transition, to meet the team, learn the systems, start building the department structure." I squeezed her hand. "I'm going, Mel. With you or without you, I'm going. Because if I stay here, in this city, with your father's shadow over everything, I'll never be more than the man who wasn't good enough for Richard Kane's daughter. Is that what you think? That you're not good enough for me?" "I think your father made sure everyone else thinks it, and I'm tired of trying to prove otherwise. We didn't sleep much that night. We held each other, we cried, we talked in circles until the words lost meaning and only the feeling remained, that terrible, aching feeling of something precious slipping through our fingers while we desperately tried to hold on. By morning, we'd made a decision. Temporary separation. I'd go to Denver, start the job, get settled. Melissa would stay for a month, wrap up her projects at work, think about what she wanted. Then we'd revisit, talk, decide together whether this marriage could survive being transplanted to new soil or whether Richard Kane's poison had already killed it from the roots. It wasn't the answer either of us wanted, but it was the answer we could live with, for now. The next week was a blur of logistics and goodbyes that felt more like endings than see you soons. I packed. Not everything that would have felt too permanent, too much, like admitting defeat. Just enough. Clothes, laptop, the essentials. 2 suitcases and a carry-on, like I was going on an extended business trip rather than potentially uprooting my entire existence. Melissa helped. We didn't talk much, just moved through the apartment in that synchronized way couples develop after years together. She'd hand me a shirt, I'd fold it. She'd pack my toiletries, I'd organize my shoes. A domestic dance we'd performed 1,000 times, now waited with the knowledge that it might be the last time. I called my parents, told them I was taking a job in Denver. My mother cried. My father, a high school teacher who'd worked the same job for 30 years and found nobility in consistency, asked careful questions about the contract, the benefits, the long-term prospects. Neither of them mentioned Richard Kane, but I could hear the unspoken relief in their voices that I was finally escaping his orbit. I didn't tell my former colleagues where I was going, partially because I was still angry at them, at the company, at the whole situation. But mostly because I didn't want Richard to know. Not yet. Let him think I was scrambling for whatever scraps I could find in the local market. Let him believe his prophecy about me coming back begging within a month. The satisfaction I'd get from proving him wrong would taste sweeter if he wasn't expecting it. My last night in the apartment, Melissa and I ordered Chinese food from the place down the street where we'd had our first date. Sweet and sour chicken, vegetable lo mein, spring rolls. We ate on the couch, watching some forgettable movie neither of us paid attention to. Her head on my shoulder, my arm around her waist. "I love you," she said during a commercial break. "I love you too. This isn't the end. You know that, right? This is just a pause, a break, a chance for both of us to figure out who we are when we're not performing for my family." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But I'd learned something in the past 2 weeks. Believing in things doesn't make them true. Hope doesn't protect you from betrayal. Love doesn't insulate you from cruelty. Sometimes the only thing you can do is move forward and see what breaks and what bends and what against all odds might actually survive. The flight to Denver was early, my 6 a.m. departure, which meant leaving the apartment at 4:30, which meant Melissa and I stood in the darkness of our building's entrance, my luggage at our feet, neither of us quite ready to say the words that would make this real. "Call me when you land," she said. "I will. And when you get to the apartment, and after your first day, and," her voice broke, "just call me, okay?" "Okay." She kissed me then. Not the passionate kiss of lovers about to be separated, but something softer, something that tasted like goodbye and maybe and I'm sorry all mixed together. "Prove him wrong," she whispered against my lips. "Prove my father wrong. About everything." "I will." "I know." The Uber driver loaded my bags. I got in the back seat. Melissa stood on the curb, wrapped in my college sweatshirt, her arms around herself like she was trying to hold something together that wanted to fall apart. I watched her in the rearview mirror until we turned the corner and she disappeared. If you've ever left someone you love, you know that moment. That terrible moment when distance becomes real, when metaphorical separation becomes physical absence, when the life you had starts becoming the life you used to have. I didn't cry until we were on the highway. The driver, bless him, said nothing, just turned up the radio slightly and kept his eyes on the road while I fell apart in his back seat. Denver greeted me with sunshine. Cruel, really. I'd expected rain, clouds, some pathetic fallacy weather to match my emotional state. Instead, the sky was aggressively blue, the mountains visible in the distance like postcards, the air thin and clean, and nothing like the humid density of home. The apartment TechCore had arranged was nice. Too nice. Furnished corporate housing in a building with a gym and a rooftop patio and neighbors who smiled in the elevator and seemed genuinely happy to be alive. It felt like a movie set, like someone's idea of what a successful person's life should look like. I unpacked mechanically, hung clothes in the closet, set up my laptop on the desk, stared at my phone, willing Melissa to call, to text, to send some signal that we were going to be okay. She didn't. I slept for 14 hours and woke up disoriented, unsure for a moment where I was or how I'd gotten here. Then it all came flooding back. Richard, the betrayal, the firing, the escape. Monday morning, I put on my best suit, one of the 3 I owned, purchased for job interviews and weddings, and occasions that demanded I look like someone I wasn't quite sure I was, and took the light rail to TechCore's headquarters. The building was glass and steel and ambition, 15 floors of innovation and corporate culture, and the kind of energy that comes from a company that's growing too fast to remember why it started in the first place. Jennifer Walsh met me in the lobby. "David Chen," she said, shaking my hand with the kind of grip that meant business. "Welcome to TechCore. Ready to build something extraordinary?" She was 50-ish, sharp suit, sharper eyes, the kind of woman who'd probably fought her way through 3 decades of corporate sexism and come out the other side more dangerous for it. I liked her immediately. "Ready as I'll be," I said. "Good, because I'm about to throw you into the deep end and see if you can swim." She wasn't kidding. The department I was building, operations strategy and integration, didn't exist yet. No team, no structure, no established processes. Just a mandate from the C-suite to fix the inefficiency problems that are costing us millions annually, and a budget that made my eyes water when I saw it. "You have 6 months, Jennifer said as we walked through the building. 6 months to build a team, develop a strategy, implement changes, and show measurable results. The board is watching. They approved this position because I convinced them you were worth the investment. Don't make me look bad. Tixtange. Don't make me look bad." "No pressure," I said. She laughed. "David, if you wanted a job without pressure, you should have stayed in middle management. This is the big leagues. You either prove yourself or you wash out. There's no comfortable middle ground here. Comfortable." Richard Kane's word. His dismissal. His ultimate insult. I smiled. I didn't come here for comfortable. I came here to show what I'm capable of, when someone actually believes in me. Jennifer stopped walking and turned to face me. "Good, because I do believe in you. Your ideas at that conference were brilliant. Your published research on operational efficiency is some of the best I've seen. And honestly," she lowered her voice, "anyone Richard Kane goes out of his way to destroy is probably someone worth investing in. That man doesn't waste energy on people who aren't a threat." I'm not sure I was a threat. I think I was just convenient. A teaching opportunity for his daughter. Maybe, or maybe he saw something in you that scared him. Something that suggested his daughter might not need him as much as he needs her to need him. She resumed walking. "Either way, you're here now. And here, your success isn't about proving anything to Richard Kane. It's about proving it to yourself." We spent the day in meetings. HR orientation, IT setup, introductions to key stakeholders. I met the CFO who'd be my primary point of contact, the heads of the departments I'd be working with, the analysts who'd be reporting to me once I built the team structure. Everyone was watching, Evaluating. Wondering if I was worth the salary, Jennifer had convinced the board to pay me. By 6 p.m., my head was spinning with names and processes and political dynamics I'd need to navigate. I found Jennifer in her office, working through a stack of reports that suggested she had no intention of going home anytime soon. "Overwhelmed yet?" she asked, without looking up. "Completely. Good. Means you're paying attention." She signed something with a flourish and added it to her out pile. "First day thoughts?" "I think I understand why you brought me in. The operational structure here it's functional, but barely. There's so much redundancy, so many processes that could be streamlined. The potential for efficiency gains is enormous." Which is exactly what I told the board. She leaned back in her chair. "But potential isn't results, and results are what you're here to deliver." "I know. Do you?" Her eyes were kind, but serious. "Because I need to be clear about something, David. I went out on a limb for you. Convinced the board to take a chance on someone who was just fired from their last position. Someone with no experience at this level. Someone whose primary reference is, got screwed over by Richard Kane. I believe in you. But belief only goes so far. You need to prove I was right to take this risk." The honesty was refreshing, terrifying, but refreshing. "I will," I said. "I promise. I won't let you down. Then we'll get along fine." She smiled. "Now go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start the real work." I took the light rail back to my temporary apartment, ordered pizza from a place I'd never heard of, and sat on my unfamiliar couch, in my unfamiliar living room, in my unfamiliar city, feeling more alone than I'd felt in years. My phone buzzed. How was the first day? Overwhelming. Good. Overwhelming. But still, how are you? Weird. The apartment feels empty. I hate it. I hate it too. My dad called. Wanted to know if you'd come to your senses yet. My jaw clenched. What did you tell him? I told him to start counting. I smiled despite everything. Despite the distance, despite the uncertainty, despite the very real possibility that this separation might become permanent. Because she'd used my words, my defiance, my refusal to let Richard Kane's prophecy become reality. I love you. I love you too. Make them see it, David. Make them all see what I've always known, that you're extraordinary. I fell asleep on the couch that night, phone in hand, Melissa's words echoing in my head like a promise I intended to keep. 28 days until Richard Kane expected me to come crawling back. 28 days to prove him wrong. The counting had begun. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who don't know you yet. My second week in Denver, I sat in a conference room with 12 candidates for my newly forming operations strategy team and felt it acutely, that particular isolation of being the new person, the unproven person, the person everyone was being polite to, while privately wondering if I'd crash and burn. The candidates were impressive. Too impressive. The kind of resume that made you wonder why they'd want to work for someone who'd been in the role for exactly 9 days. MIT graduates, former consultants from McKinsey and Deloitte, people who'd optimized operations for Fortune 500 companies while I was still figuring out how to navigate middle management politics. Tell me why you're here, I said to the woman sitting directly across from me. Her name was Sarah Chen, no relation, and her resume read like a greatest hits album of corporate success. You could work anywhere. Why TechCore? Why this role? Why me? She didn't hesitate. Because Jennifer Walsh doesn't make bad bets. And because anyone who can survive being strategically destroyed by Richard Kane and come out the other side with a better position is someone I want to learn from. The room went quiet. So Jennifer had told them, or they'd researched me, or most likely the story had already spread through the industry grapevine that moves at the speed of gossip and schadenfreude. Richard Kane didn't destroy me, I said carefully. He tried. There's a difference. Exactly. Sarah leaned forward. Most people would have crumbled, taken whatever local position they could find, licked their wounds, spent the rest of their careers being careful. You took a risk, moved across the country, took a position 2 levels above where you were. That's either courage or crazy, and I'm betting on courage. I hired her on the spot. Over the next week, I built my team. 8 people. Analysts, strategists, process engineers. Each one chosen not just for their skills but for their hunger, that particular combination of ambition and frustration that comes from being underutilized, from knowing you're capable of more but never being given the chance. We were a department of misfits and second chances. People who'd been overlooked, passed over, told they weren't ready. People who had something to prove, just like me. Our first real meeting was on a Friday. I'd booked the largest conference room, ordered coffee and bagels, and prepared a presentation that I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. perfecting. The team filed in, chatting amongst themselves, forming those tentative early bonds that either solidify into real connection or fragment into office politics. I watched them, these 8 people whose careers I now held partial responsibility for, and felt the weight of it settle into my chest. Jennifer had said I had 6 months to show results. 6 months to prove this department was worth the investment. 6 months to justify not just my salary, but theirs, the resources, the faith. No pressure. Okay, I said, and the room quieted. Before we get into the operational analysis and strategic planning and all the things you were hired to do, I want to tell you a story. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Is this the Richard Kane story? Because I've already heard 3 versions. Then you can compare notes. I smiled, but it felt tight. 3 months ago, I was in middle management at a company I genuinely liked. Good people, good culture, steady work. I'd been developing an operational efficiency proposal, 6 months of research, the kind of comprehensive analysis I'd always wanted the chance to do. I walked them through it. The dinner, the manipulation, the betrayal, the firing, the call from Jennifer. Every detail that still made my stomach clench when I thought about it too long. I'm telling you this, I said when I finished, because I want you to understand something about this department, about this team, about what we're building here. We're not here to be comfortable. We're not here to maintain the status quo. We're here to prove that the people who overlooked us, who underestimated us, who thought we weren't ready, they were wrong. The room was silent. Jennifer gave me 6 months. I'm giving us 4. 4 months to completely revolutionize how TechCore operates. 4 months to save this company millions while improving employee satisfaction and output. 4 months to show results that are so undeniable, so impressive, that when people look back at this moment, they'll wonder how TechCore ever functioned without us. That's ambitious, someone said. James, I think, an analyst from Georgia with a degree in industrial engineering and a reputation for brutal honesty. It is, I agreed. It's also necessary, because here's what I learned from Richard Kane. The one valuable thing that came from that nightmare. People will believe what you show them, not what you tell them, not what you promise, what you demonstrate. So, we're going to demonstrate. Loudly, clearly, undeniably. What's the plan? Sarah asked. I pulled up the first slide of my presentation. I'm glad you asked. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in controlled chaos. We divided into sub-teams. Sarah led the workflow analysis group, mapping every process across 3 departments with the kind of obsessive detail that would make forensic accountants proud. James headed up the data analytics team, building models to identify redundancies and inefficiencies. The rest of the team split between stakeholder interviews, process documentation, and competitive analysis. I was everywhere and nowhere, coordinating, facilitating, occasionally making executive decisions that I hoped weren't disastrous. The learning curve was steep. This wasn't middle management anymore, where you implemented someone else's vision. This was creating the vision, selling it to skeptics, navigating corporate politics at a level where mistakes had six-figure consequences. I called Melissa every night. Sometimes we talked for hours. About her day, my day, the strange disconnect of being married to someone you couldn't touch. Other times, we barely spoke 10 minutes, both of us too exhausted to form coherent sentences, just needing to hear each other's voices as proof that we still existed to each other. "I miss you," she said one night, 3 weeks into my Denver tenure. "I miss you too. My mother asked about you today. Wanted to know if you were surviving out there." Melissa's voice carried that particular edge it got when discussing her family. Like Denver is some kind of wilderness, and you're roughing it without the Kane family safety net. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you're thriving, that you're building something incredible, that her husband's attempt to destroy you only made you stronger." A pause. She didn't know what to say to that. "How's your dad?" Melissa sighed. "Insufferable. He keeps asking when you're planning to admit defeat and come home. He's literally counting down the days until his 1-month deadline. He mentioned it at dinner last week. 2 weeks, until David realizes I was right. Like it's a game to him. It was a game to him. That was the thing about Richard Kane. Everything was a transaction, a competition, a chance to prove his worldview correct. And his worldview was simple. The strong survive, the weak beg for mercy. And sentiment is for people who can't afford real power. 17 days, I said. What? 17 days until his deadline. 17 days until he expects me to come crawling back. I was lying in my corporate apartment bed, staring at the ceiling, doing the math I'd been doing obsessively since I left. "Mel, I need to ask you something." "Okay. Are you coming? To Denver, I mean. When your projects wrap up, when you've had time to think, are you coming?" The silence stretched long enough that I started counting heartbeats. "I don't know," she said finally. "I want to. God, I want to. But David, if I come to Denver, I'm not just leaving a city. I'm leaving my family." And yes, my father is a monster, and my mother is complicit, and the whole situation is toxic, but they're still my family. They're still the people who raised me, who never accepted me, who spent 3 years making me feel like I wasn't good enough for you, who actively sabotaged my career to prove a point. "I know," her voice broke. "I know all of that, but choosing you means losing them, and I'm not sure I'm ready to make that choice." If you've ever loved someone who's caught between you and their family, you know the helplessness. The wanting to say, "choose me," while knowing that demanding someone choose is the surest way to lose them. The understanding that love isn't always enough, that sometimes history and obligation and guilt are stronger chains than affection. "I'm not asking you to choose," I lied, "because I was. Of course I was. I'm just asking you to think about what kind of life you want. With me in Denver, building something real. Or there, under your father's shadow, proving nothing will ever change." "That's not fair." "I know." We talked for another hour, circling the same territory, neither of us willing to push hard enough to force a decision. When we finally hung up, I felt more alone than I had since arriving. Week 4 brought the first major breakthrough. Sarah's team had mapped the entire workflow for the product development department, every step, every approval, every handoff that slowed innovation to a crawl. She presented her findings in a conference room packed with skeptical stakeholders who'd been operating the same way for 5 years and saw no reason to change. "You're currently averaging 127 days from concept to prototype approval," Sarah said, clicking through her slides with the confidence of someone who knew her data was bulletproof. "Industry standard is 78 days. Best in class is 52. Our process is thorough, the product development VP said. He was a lifer, 20 years at TechCore, the kind of guy who'd seen a dozen consultants come through with their revolutionary ideas that never quite revolutionized anything. We can't sacrifice quality for speed. You're not sacrificing quality. You're sacrificing speed for redundancy. Sarah pulled up a workflow diagram that looked like a bowl of spaghetti. You have 7 approval stages. 4 of them are redundant. 3 different people are reviewing for the same criteria at different stages. You're not being thorough, you're being inefficient. The room erupted in defensive explanations. Budget concerns, regulatory requirements, the complexity of the products, the importance of multiple checkpoints. I let it go for about 3 minutes before standing up. Enough, I said quietly. The room went silent. Sarah, show them the proposed workflow. She clicked to the next slide. Same process, streamlined to 4 approval stages, with clear criteria for each, eliminating redundancy while maintaining quality controls. This cuts your timeline to 73 days, I said. 6 months from now, when you're bringing products to market faster than your competitors, when your team isn't burned out from navigating bureaucratic maze work, you'll wonder why you waited so long to change. And if it doesn't work? The VP asked. If quality suffers, if we miss critical issues because we removed those redundant checkpoints, then we'll adjust. But doing nothing isn't an option. Jennifer hired me to fix inefficiencies that are costing TechCore millions annually. This is one of them. The question isn't whether you're going to change. The question is whether you're going to be part of the solution or part of the problem. It was a risk, a huge risk. You don't tell VPs they're part of the problem in front of their teams, unless you're very confident or very stupid. I was hoping for the former, but couldn't entirely rule out the latter. The VP stared at me for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he laughed. The VP. That side. The VP stared at me for a long moment. You've got balls, Chen. I'll give you that. He looked at Sarah's diagram again. Fine. Pilot it. 1 project through the new workflow. But if it fails, if quality suffers, we go back to our process, and this department stays out of product development. Deal, I said. I respected every 4. After the meeting, Sarah cornered me in the hallway. That was either brilliant or career suicide, she said. Probably both. I was running on adrenaline and 3 hours of sleep and the desperate need to prove something. But we can't be timid. Timid doesn't get results. Timid doesn't justify our budget. Timid doesn't prove that this department deserves to exist. You're really hung up on proving things, aren't you? Aren't you? She considered this. Fair point. But David, you know the whole team is watching you, right? Trying to figure out if you're the real deal or if you're going to flame out. There's a betting pool. A betting pool. On whether you make it past the 6-month mark. Odds are currently 60-40 inches your favor, if that helps. It didn't. But it was information. What did you bet? I asked. Sarah smiled. I took the under on 6 months. Meaning you think I'll fail. Meaning, I think you'll exceed expectations so dramatically that Jennifer promotes you before the 6 months are up. You're not playing for survival, David. You're playing for domination. There's a difference. That night, I worked until midnight, refining the presentation I'd been building for the executive committee. In 2 weeks, I'd be presenting our preliminary findings and proposed changes to the C-suite. 2 weeks to prove this department was worth the investment. 2 weeks, coincidentally, before Richard Kane's 1-month deadline. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then curiosity got the better of me. David Chen. David. The voice was familiar in the worst way. It's Richard. My hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? Please. I'm a CEO. I can get any number I want. He sounded amused. I'm calling to see how you're doing. I know it's been a few weeks since you left. Wanted to check in. I'm fine. Are you? Because I've heard some interesting things about a new job. Denver, quite the step up from middle management. TechCore, is it? So he knew. Of course he knew. Richard Kane made it his business to know things. What do you want, Richard? Want? Nothing. I'm simply reaching out as family. You're still married to my daughter, after all. That makes us family, whether you like it or not. He paused. I'll be honest, David. I'm impressed. Running away to another city, taking a job you're not qualified for, playing pretend at the big leagues. It takes a certain kind of delusion or desperation. I'm neither delusional nor desperate. No? Then why did Jennifer Walsh have to call in 3 favors to convince her board to hire you? Why did she have to personally guarantee your performance? Do you have any idea how much pressure you're under? How spectacular your failure will be? When, not if, when you crash. You sound worried. Richard laughed. Worried? About you? David? I'm many things, but worried about your career prospects isn't one of them. I'm simply calling to remind you that pride is expensive. Very expensive. And when you've burned through whatever goodwill Jennifer Walsh extended you, when TechCore realizes they made a mistake, when you're looking for your next position and find that doors are mysteriously closed, well, I'll still be here. We're family, after all. We're not family. We're related by marriage. There's a difference. Is there? Asked Melissa. Ask her what it's like to choose between her husband and her blood. Ask her what it's like to watch you implode from 1,200 miles away, knowing she could have prevented all this if she'd just married someone appropriate. Don't use Melissa as leverage. I'm not using her as anything. I'm simply pointing out reality. You have what, 10 days left on our little wager? 10 days before you're supposed to come crawling back, begging for help? I'm starting to think you might actually be stupid enough to wait out the full month before admitting defeat. That's fine. I'm a patient man. I won't be coming back, Richard. Not in 10 days. Not ever. We'll see. He sounded supremely confident. Enjoy your little adventure in Colorado, David. Try not to burn too many bridges on your way down. You might need them. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there, phone in hand, anger coursing through me like electricity. He was in my head. Still. Even 1,200 miles away, Richard Kane was in my head, making me doubt, making me question, making me feel like that inadequate middle manager who'd never be good enough for his daughter. I pulled up my presentation, looked at the data, the projections, the comprehensive strategy my team had built in less than a month. Then I looked at my calendar. 10 days until Richard's deadline. 14 days until my presentation to the executive committee. Both dates circled in red, like appointments with destiny. I added a third date, 2 weeks after the exec presentation, circled it in red, wrote next to it, the day Richard Kane realizes he was wrong. Then I got back to work. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting with my team. Change of plans, I announced. We're accelerating the timeline. I want the full operational efficiency proposal ready in 2 weeks instead of 4. That's insane, James said. We're already working 16-hour days. I know, and I'm asking you to work harder. Not because I'm a sadist, because we have an opportunity to make a statement. A big statement. The kind of statement that defines careers. I looked at each of them. I'm not going to lie. This will be brutal. You'll hate me by the end of it. But you'll also have built something extraordinary. Something you can point to for the rest of your career as proof of what you're capable of when someone actually believes in you. Sarah was watching me carefully. This is about proving something to Richard Kane, isn't it? It's about proving something to ourselves. Richard Kane is just the audience. The team looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them that I wasn't privy to. That unspoken consensus that teams either reach or don't. Fine, Sarah said. But when this is over, you're buying the entire team very expensive dinners. Deal. They worked like demons possessed. 2 weeks of 18-hour days, weekend sessions, coffee-fueled all-nighters that would probably violate several labor laws if anyone was paying attention. I worked alongside them. Not above them. Alongside them. In the data. In the analysis. In the grinding detail work that separates good strategy from great strategy. Melissa called less frequently. When we did talk, the conversations were shorter, more strained. The distance wasn't just physical anymore. I need to decide, she said one night, 8 days before Richard's deadline. About Denver. About us. About everything. I know. I love you. I love you too. But Mel, I stopped, trying to find words for something I wasn't sure I wanted to say. Love might not be enough. Not if you can't let go of your family. Not if you can't choose a future that doesn't include your father's approval. That's not fair. Life's not fair. Your father taught me that. We hung up angry. Didn't talk for 2 days. When she finally called back, her voice was different. Decided. I'm coming, she said. What? To Denver. I'm coming. I gave notice at work, told my parents, packed half the apartment. I'm coming, David. We're doing this together. The relief was so intense, I had to sit down. When? 2 weeks. I need to finish my notice period. Tie up loose ends. But then I'm coming. Your father can go to hell. Her voice was steel. I'm choosing us. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing a life where I'm not constantly defending my husband to people who should love him because I love him. I'm done, David. I'm done with all of it. I wanted to tell her I loved her. Wanted to tell her this was the right choice. Wanted to express the hope and fear and desperate relief flooding through me. Instead, I said, 2 weeks from now is the day after my executive presentation. I know, I timed it that way. Figured you'd want to focus on that without worrying about me. You're too good for me. I know that too. She laughed, and it sounded like the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her in a month. Go prove my father wrong, David. Then we'll build our new life. Together. 7 days until Richard Kane's deadline. 7 days until I faced my father-in-law's prophecy. The counting was almost over. Time moves differently when you're being watched. 6 days before Richard Kane's deadline, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror at 5 a.m., tie hanging loose around my neck, and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept more than 4 hours. My reflection looked like a stranger thinner, harder somehow, with shadows under my eyes that spoke of ambition and exhaustion in equal measure. My phone buzzed. Sarah, texting the team channel. Final data set complete. Models are clean. We're ready. We weren't ready. Not really. You're never ready when you're trying to accomplish in 4 weeks what should take 4 months. But ready was a luxury we couldn't afford. So ready would have to be whatever we could make it. I finished knotting my tie, a blue one Melissa had given me for our 2nd anniversary. Back when we still believed in things like anniversaries and forever, and headed to the office. The building was already alive with that pre-dawn energy that comes from people who've forgotten what normal working hours feel like. Lights on in the operations wing, coffee brewing, the hum of computers processing data that would either make or break us. My team was scattered across our designated conference room, which had essentially become our home for the past month. Whiteboards covered in equations and flowcharts, laptops open, energy drink cans forming small architectural structures on every available surface. Morning, I said, though morning felt like an inadequate word for whatever this liminal space between night and day was. Define morning, James muttered without looking up from his screen. Because I'm pretty sure I just lived through 3 different days without ever leaving this building. Dramatic, Sarah said, but she was smiling, She looked as exhausted as I felt, but there was something else there too. Pride, maybe. Or the particular satisfaction that comes from knowing you've built something that works. Walk me through it, I said. One more time. Pretend I'm the CFO who's going to tear this apart, looking for weaknesses. For the next 3 hours, we rehearsed. Sarah presented the workflow analysis. James covered the data models and projected savings. The rest of the team walked through implementation timelines, risk mitigation strategies, stakeholder management plans. It was good. Better than good. It was the kind of comprehensive, bulletproof strategy that justified every dollar TechCore had invested in this department. But was it enough? That was the question that haunted me as I listened to my team present. Was it enough to prove we deserved to exist? Was it enough to justify Jennifer's faith? Was it enough to show Richard Kane that his prophecy was built on pride rather than prediction? "You're overthinking," Sarah said after we'd finished the run-through. The rest of the team had scattered for food, bathroom breaks, brief moments of normalcy. "I can see it on your face, that look that says you're wondering if we're good enough." "Are we?" "David, we've mapped operational inefficiencies across 5 departments. We've identified $8.7 million in annual savings. We've built implementation plans that maintain quality while improving speed. We've done in 1 month what most consulting firms take 6 months to do." She leaned back in her chair. "Stop asking if we're good enough and start believing we're exceptional. Belief doesn't save you from failure. I know. You've said it 1,000 times." She stood up, walked to the whiteboard where we'd been tracking our progress. "But you know what? Neither does fear. You can be terrified of failing or confident in succeeding. And either way, the result is going to be what it's going to be. The data doesn't care about your emotional state." She was right. Of course she was right. But knowing something intellectually and believing it emotionally are different countries that don't always share a border. 5 days, I said. Until Richard Kane expects me to come crawling back. 5 days until his 1-month deadline. Sarah studied me for a moment. You know the deadline is arbitrary, right? You know that whether you win or lose, this imaginary bet doesn't actually matter in the real world? Tell that to my father-in-law. Your father-in-law is a narcissistic bully who gets off on making people feel small. The opinion of someone like that shouldn't matter to you. But it does. The admission cost something. It matters because he made it matter. Because he spent 3 years making me feel inadequate, and then he engineered my firing to prove he was right. And now, I stopped. Now I need him to be wrong. Not for him, for me. I need to know that I'm more than his assessment of me. You are. Prove it. Sarah smiled. That's what the presentation is for. 4 days before the deadline, Jennifer called me into her office. I'd been expecting this. The check-in. The "how are you really doing" conversation that executives have with risky hires when they start wondering if they've made a terrible mistake. Her office was on the 14th floor, all glass and city views and the kind of furniture that cost more than my first car. She was on the phone when I arrived, gesturing for me to sit while she wrapped up a conversation that involved phrases like unacceptable margins and board expectations. When she hung up, she looked tired. Not the same kind of tired I was. Hers was the exhaustion of carrying responsibility for thousands of employees, billions in revenue, shareholders who expected magic quarter after quarter. David, she said, talk to me. Real talk. How are we doing? We're ready. I didn't ask if you were ready. I asked how you're doing. The distinction mattered. I'm terrified, I admitted. Terrified that I've pushed my team too hard. Terrified that I've overpromised. Terrified that you took a chance on me, and I'm going to prove Richard Kane right that I'm not capable of operating at this level. Jennifer nodded slowly. Good. Good? Fear means you understand the stakes. The executives I worry about are the ones who walk into high-pressure situations convinced they can't fail. That's when you get disasters. She stood, walked to her window. Denver spread out below us, mountains in the distance, the city waking up to possibilities. But David, I need you to channel that fear into fuel, not paralysis. Because here's what's happening. The board is watching this department closely. Some of them never believed we needed it. They see operation strategy as consulting firm work, something you contract out, not build internally. I didn't know that. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you operating under that pressure. But we're past the point where protection serves you. She turned to face me. Your presentation to the executive committee isn't just about showing results. It's about justifying this department's existence. If you don't wow them, if you don't demonstrate clear, measurable value, they'll shut us down and outsource the work. But, in quote, the weight of it settled into my chest like stones. So no pressure, I said. Exactly the amount of pressure you should be feeling. She smiled, but it was edged with something harder. I believe in you. I believe in the team you've built. But belief only goes so far. Now, you need to prove it. There was that word again, prove. My entire life in Denver had become an exercise in proving things. Proving Richard wrong. Proving Jennifer right. Proving to myself that I was more than the sum of my failures. We'll deliver, I said. I know you will. Because the alternative isn't an option. She sat back down. Now, separate question. How are you? Personally, I know Melissa is still in the other city. I know the Richard Kane situation is messy. I need to know you're holding it together. Melissa's coming to Denver in a week and a half. That's good news. It is, but it also means she's choosing me over her family, over her father. And if I fail, if this presentation bombs, if the department gets shut down, if I prove Richard right, then she'll have sacrificed her relationship with her family for nothing. That's a lot of weight to carry. It's the weight I signed up for. Jennifer studied me for a long moment. David, can I tell you something off the record? Of course. Richard Kane is a brilliant businessman and a terrible human being. I've known him for 15 years, done deals with him, competed against him, watched him operate. And the thing about Richard is that he mistakes cruelty for strength. He thinks breaking people proves he's powerful. But real power is building people up, creating environments where they can exceed their own expectations. She leaned forward. You're not trying to prove Richard wrong. You're trying to prove yourself right. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, because proving Richard wrong still gives him power over you. Proving yourself right takes that power back. The words landed like truth. 3 days before the deadline, the first crack appeared. James found an error in one of our data models. Small, barely significant. The kind of thing that wouldn't matter in any normal circumstance. But these weren't normal circumstances. And small errors become catastrophic failures when you're operating without margin for mistakes. How bad? I asked. We were in the conference room at 11 p.m. Just the two of us. Everyone else having finally gone home at my insistence. Bad enough that we need to rerun the entire financial projection model. Which means another all-nighter. Which means we might not have clean numbers for the presentation. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. David, I'm sorry. I should have caught this earlier. Stop. We all missed it. That's why we review. That's why we check and double-check and obsess over details. I pulled up the model on my laptop. Can we fix it? Yes, but it'll take time we don't have. Then we'll make time. We worked until 4 a.m., reran every calculation, verified every assumption, stress-tested every projection, until we were both seeing numbers in our sleep. By the time the sun started painting the sky that particular shade of pre-dawn gray, we had clean data. I sent James home, stayed at my desk, stared at the presentation for what felt like hours, making tiny adjustments that probably didn't matter, but felt necessary anyway. My phone buzzed. Melissa. Can't sleep. Thinking about you. 3 more days until the big deadline. How are you feeling? Tired, terrified, determined, the usual. My dad mentioned it again at dinner tonight. Said he's looking forward to welcoming you back to reality when the month is up. I told him the only thing happening in 3 days is him realizing he was wrong. What did he say? He laughed, said I was adorable when I was naive. I threw my napkin at him and left. You threw a napkin at Richard Kane? A really expensive napkin, probably Italian, definitely monogrammed. He was not amused. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the pressure, the fear, I smiled. Me? I love you. I love you too. Go get some sleep. You need to be sharp for when you destroy his expectations. I wanted to sleep. My body was screaming for it. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard's face, heard his voice telling me I wasn't good enough. Relived that moment in my in-laws' house, when he'd essentially told me I'd failed at being worthy of his daughter. So, instead of sleeping, I worked. 2 days before the deadline, TechCore's CFO requested a pre-brief. He wants to see the numbers before the executive presentation, Jennifer explained via email. It's unusual, but he has the authority to request it. Can you pull something together for this afternoon? I could. I did. I walked into his office at 3 p.m. with a condensed version of our findings and the growing suspicion that this was some kind of test. Michael Torres, CFO, was 60-something with the kind of face that suggested he'd spent his entire career saying no to things and enjoying it. He gestured to a chair without looking up from whatever spreadsheet commanded his attention. Mr. Chen, he said eventually, I've been reviewing the budget allocated to your department. Substantial investment for a team that's been operational for less than 2 months. Yes, sir. Jennifer speaks highly of you. Says you're going to revolutionize our operations. He finally looked at me. I'm skeptical. That's fair. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you're an unproven mid-level manager who got fired from his last position under questionable circumstances, got hired by Jennifer based on what appears to be potential rather than performance, and is now asking the company to bet millions on your strategic vision. He leaned back. So well, why should I believe you're worth the investment? If you've ever been in a room where someone has decided you're guilty before you've even defended yourself, you know the feeling. That particular cocktail of anger and humiliation and the desperate need to prove them wrong. May I show you the analysis? I asked, keeping my voice level. He gestured permission. I walked him through everything. The workflow inefficiencies we'd identified, the redundant processes costing millions annually, the implementation plans that would save money while improving output, the metrics, the projections, the comprehensive strategy my team had built. He listened without interrupting. Asked pointed questions about assumptions, risk factors, implementation challenges, poked at weak points in the analysis with the precision of someone who'd spent decades finding holes in people's logic. By the time I finished, an hour had passed. My throat was dry. My hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline. Michael Torres sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then he smiled. You know what I told Jennifer when she wanted to hire you? He said. I told her it was a mistake, that we didn't need an entire department for work we could outsource, that you were a risk, not worth taking. My heart sank. But this, he tapped the presentation summary I'd left with him. This is exceptional work. Thorough, well-researched, strategically sound. If you can execute even 70% of what's outlined here, you'll have justified your budget within the first year. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Prove me wrong. He stood, extended his hand. I'm a skeptic by nature, Mr. Chen. It's kept this company solvent through 3 recessions. But I'm also pragmatic. Good work is good work, regardless of who does it. Deliver this presentation to the executive committee the way you just delivered it to me, and you'll have my support. I shook his hand, walked out of his office, made it to the bathroom before my legs gave out, sat in a stall, and just breathed. One more day until Richard's deadline. One more day until I either proved him wrong or confirmed his worst assessment of me. The day before the deadline, I gave my team the day off. "You're kidding," Sarah said when I announced it at our morning stand-up. "You've worked yourselves to the bone for a month. The presentation is solid, the data is clean. We're as ready as we're going to be. Now, you need rest." "What about you?" James asked. "I'm taking the day off too." It was a lie. We both knew it, but they were too exhausted to argue. I spent the day alone, walked around Denver, this city I'd moved to a month ago, this place that was supposed to represent a fresh start, but still felt foreign. Found a park, sat on a bench, watched people live their lives, joggers, families, couples, people for whom this was just a normal Thursday with no deadlines or prophecies hanging over them. My phone rang. Unknown number again. I knew who it was before I answered. "Hello, Richard." "David." He sounded pleased with himself. "Tomorrow's the big day. 1 month since you ran away to Denver. 1 month since you decided pride was more important than pragmatism. How are you feeling?" "Confident." "Are you?" "Because I've been hearing things. About TechCore. About budget concerns. About a certain new department that's on shaky ground with the board." He paused for effect. "It would be a shame if you'd burned all your bridges, only to end up unemployed in a strange city, especially with Melissa on her way there. She's told you she's coming, I assume?" "She has." "Did she tell you I offered her a position, executive track, her own department, real responsibility, real money? All she had to do was reconsider this Denver adventure." My hand tightened on the phone. What did she say? "She told me to, and I quote, shove my nepotistic bullshit and choke on it." He actually laughed. "My daughter has such a colorful vocabulary when she's angry." "She gets that from her mother." "Why are you calling, Richard?" "To give you one last chance. Come home. I'll find you a position. Not at my company, that would be awkward, but somewhere appropriate. Middle management, something safe, something that matches your actual skill level. Melissa stays happy. I maintain my relationship with my daughter. You get to keep some dignity. Everyone wins. Except I'd be admitting you were right, that I can't make it on my own, that I need Richard Kane to save me." "Is that so terrible?" "Knowing your limitations is a strength, not a weakness." I stood up from the bench, started walking. Needed to move, needed motion to match the anger building in my chest. "You want to know what I've learned in the past month, Richard? I've learned that the only limitations I have are the ones I accept. You spent 3 years telling me I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't worthy of your daughter, and I believed you. I internalized it. I made it my truth. I was walking faster now, words spilling out. But you know what? You were wrong. About me. About what I'm capable of. About everything." "We'll see about that tomorrow, won't we?" "Yes, we will. And when tomorrow comes, and I haven't come crawling back, when I'm still here in Denver building something extraordinary, I want you to remember this conversation. Remember that you had the chance to be a father-in-law instead of an adversary. Remember that you chose cruelty over kindness, pride over family, being right over being decent." "David, start counting, Richard. Because the only person on a deadline here is you. You have 24 hours to prepare yourself for being wrong." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. But underneath the adrenaline and anger was something else. Relief. Because I'd finally said it. Finally stood up to him. Finally stopped letting Richard Kane's voice in my head define my worth. I walked for another hour, until the sun started setting, and the mountains turned purple against the orange sky. Then I went back to my apartment, ordered pizza, and watched the most mindless action movie I could find on Netflix. Tomorrow would come. Richard's deadline would pass. And either I'd prove I belonged here, or I'd learn that belief and hard work weren't enough. But tonight, for the first time in a month, I let myself just be. My phone buzzed one more time. Melissa. One day. Tomorrow, he'll know he was wrong. I believe in you. Me. I'm starting to believe in me too. About damn time. I fell asleep on my couch, phone in hand, the movie still playing, and dreamed of nothing at all. When I woke up, it was Friday. The deadline had arrived. Friday arrived like a verdict. I woke at 4:47 a.m. not to an alarm, but to the simple fact that my body had decided sleep was a luxury it could no longer afford. The apartment was dark, silent, except for the ambient hum of a building full of people still dreaming. I lay there for exactly 3 minutes, staring at the ceiling, before giving up the pretense of rest. The presentation was at 10 a.m. Richard's deadline was technically at midnight, but in my mind, it had already arrived. 29 days, 23 hours, and 13 minutes since I'd walked out of my in-laws' house, with Richard's words echoing behind me. You'll be back begging within a month. Today, he'd find out he was wrong. Or he'd be proven catastrophically right. I showered in water too hot, letting it scald some clarity into my consciousness. Put on my best suit charcoal gray, the one I'd bought for my wedding 3 years ago, when I still believed in things like happily ever after and family acceptance, the time Melissa had given me for our anniversary. Shoes polished to a military shine. If I was going to fail, I'd fail looking like I deserved to be in the room. The kitchen was a study in efficiency. Coffee, black. Toast, dry. Food as fuel, not comfort. I stood at the window while I ate, watching Denver wake up beneath a sky that couldn't decide between sunrise and storm clouds. Seemed fitting. The pathetic fallacy I'd been denied when I first arrived, delivered right on time for the dramatic conclusion. My phone sat on the counter, silent. No messages from Melissa, she knew better than to add to the pressure this morning. No calls from Richard, he was waiting, watching, counting down the hours until he could claim victory. No text from my team, they'd sent their good luck wishes last night, each message a small vote of confidence that I didn't entirely believe but desperately needed. I picked up the phone anyway, stared at it, put it down, then picked it up again and typed a message I'd been composing in my head for weeks. To Richard, the month is over. I'm still standing. Start counting how many months it takes for you to realize you never knew me at all. My finger hovered over send. I deleted it. Because Sarah was right. I wasn't trying to prove Richard wrong anymore. I was trying to prove myself right. And proving myself right didn't require an audience of one cruel man waiting for me to fail. Instead, I sent a different message to Melissa. Whatever happens today, thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. She responded within seconds. You've got this. Now go show them who you are. The office at 6 a.m. was a different world. Empty corridors, dark offices, the particular silence that comes from a space designed for hundreds, but occupied by none. My footsteps echoed as I made my way to the 14th floor, to the executive conference room where in 4 hours I'd either justify my existence or validate every doubt anyone had ever had about me. The room was glass and steel and intimidation. A table that could seat 20 screens for presentations. Chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I'd been in here once before, for orientation, and it had felt like a museum, beautiful, but untouchable. A space for people who belonged at levels I'd only aspired to. Now I had to convince those people I belonged here too. I set up my laptop, tested the connection to the presentation screens, adjusted the lighting, rearranged my notes. Did all the small rituals people do when they're trying to control the uncontrollable. trying to find order in chaos, trying to believe that preparation equals success. You're here early. I turned. Jennifer stood in the doorway, 2 coffee cups in hand, looking far too put together for 6 a.m. Couldn't sleep, I admitted. Neither could I. She handed me one of the coffees. Spent half the night reviewing your presentation. The other half wondering if I was about to watch my credibility with the board evaporate because I bet on a wild card. That's comforting. It should be. Means I have as much writing on this as you do. She sat in one of those expensive chairs. You ready? I have no idea. Good answer. Better than false confidence. She sipped her coffee, studied me over the rim. David, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. David, privately. David. Okay. Whatever happens in this room in 4 hours, you've already succeeded. I must have looked skeptical because she laughed. I'm serious. A month ago, you had nothing. No job, a damaged reputation, a father-in-law actively sabotaging you, a marriage in crisis. Now, you've built a department from scratch, assembled a team that would walk through fire for you, developed a comprehensive operational strategy that even Michael Torres, who hates everything, thinks is exceptional. You've already won, David. The presentation is just making it official. Tell that to the board members who want to shut us down. I will, with data, with results, with the undeniable evidence that hiring you was the smartest decision TechCore made this quarter. She stood. But you need to believe it too. Because if you walk into this room thinking you have to prove you deserve to be here, you've already lost. Walk in knowing you deserve to be here. There's a difference. After she left, I sat alone with those words. You've already won. Had I? It didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, hoping the ground on the other side was solid enough to catch me. But maybe that was what winning looked like when you'd spent 3 years being told you weren't good enough. Maybe victory was just the absence of failure, dressed up in better lighting. The team started arriving at 8:30. Sarah first, looking like she'd actually slept, which made one of us. Then James, carrying enough coffee for a small army. The others filtered in over the next 20 minutes, each bringing their particular brand of nervous energy. So, Sarah said, settling into a chair, on a scale of 1 to catastrophic, how nervous are you? 11. Honest. I appreciate that. She pulled out her laptop. Want to run through it one more time? No. If we don't know it by now, one more rehearsal won't help. Also honest. She closed the laptop. Then let's talk about something else. Anything else. What are you doing when this is over? Assuming I still have a job? Assuming you still have a job, and the board gives us a standing ovation, and Michael Torres cries actual tears of joy at our brilliance. Despite everything, I smiled. Melissa arrives in 8 days. I'm picking her up from the airport, taking her to the apartment, and sleeping for approximately 72 hours. Romantic. You haven't seen our sleep schedules this month. Trust me, it's deeply romantic. James snorted. Remember when we used to have normal lives? Before this job consumed our souls? Barely, someone else said. I miss daylight, another team member added. Like naturally occurring daylight, not the artificial fluorescent suggestion of daylight. I miss food that doesn't come from a vending machine or a delivery service, Sarah said. Actual home-cooked food, the kind that requires, like, vegetables and effort. We spent the next hour like that, talking about nothing, about everything, about all the small normal things we'd sacrifice to build something extraordinary. It was exactly what I needed, a reminder that beyond this presentation, beyond Richard's deadline, beyond all the pressure and fear and desperation to prove something, there was still life, still normalcy, still a future that wasn't defined entirely by this one moment. At 9:45, Jennifer appeared in the doorway. They're ready for you. The executive committee was already seated when we entered. 9 people. The CEO, CFO, COO, and various VPs, whose domains we'd been analyzing, dissecting, and proposing to revolutionize. 9 people whose collective decisions shaped the trajectory of thousands of employees and billions in revenue. 9 people who held my future in their hands. Michael Torres nodded at me. Not quite encouragement, but acknowledgement. The CEO, Patricia Chen, again, no relation, gestured to the presentation space. "Mr. Chen," she said. Her voice had that particular quality of someone who'd spent decades in boardrooms and had exactly 0 patience for wasted time. "Jennifer speaks very highly of you and your team. We're interested to hear what you found." No pressure. Just the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company casually mentioning that my boss had staked her reputation on me. I looked at my team, scattered in chairs along the side of the room. Sarah gave me a small nod. James, a thumbs up. The others, various expressions of support and shared terror. Then I looked at the executives, and I began. 4 weeks ago, I walked into this building with a theory, I said, pulling up the first slide. The theory was that TechCore, despite being an industry leader, was hemorrhaging money through operational inefficiency, not because anyone was incompetent, not because the processes were wrong when they were implemented, but because companies evolve faster than their operations, and what worked 5 years ago becomes a bottleneck today. I clicked to the next slide. A web of interconnected processes, color-coded by department. This is TechCore's current operational structure. It's functional. It works. But works isn't the same as optimal. And in an industry where competitors are constantly innovating, where margins are tight and talent is expensive, functional is the difference between market leadership and irrelevance. I walked them through everything. The workflow analysis that showed redundancies costing millions, the data models that projected savings, the implementation plans that would streamline without sacrificing quality. Every slide was a story, not just of problems, but of solutions. Not just of what was wrong, but of what could be right. Sarah presented the product development findings, the 127-day timeline we could cut to 73 days. James covered the financial projections with the kind of detailed analysis that made Michael Torres lean forward in his seat. The rest of the team walked through implementation risks, change management strategies, timeline expectations. We'd rehearsed this a dozen times, but something was different now. Maybe it was the audience. Maybe it was the stakes. Maybe it was simply that a month of brutal work had compressed us into something sharper, harder, more focused than we'd been when we started. Whatever it was, we were good. Better than good. We were exceptional. The questions came fast. The COO challenged our timeline assumptions. A VP questioned whether we'd adequately accounted for regulatory requirements. Another wanted clarification on how we'd measured current inefficiencies. I answered, not defensively, but confidently, because I knew this material. I'd lived it for a month. I'd questioned every assumption, stress-tested every model, anticipated every objection. This was my work, my team's work, and it was bulletproof. An hour passed, then 90 minutes. The presentation that was supposed to take 60 minutes stretched as questions led to deeper discussions as the executives started to see not just what we'd found, but what it meant for TechCore's future. Finally, Patricia held up a hand. "I think we've heard enough," she said. My heart stopped. This is, she paused, looked at her fellow executives. This is the most comprehensive operational analysis I've seen in 20 years at this company. The depth of research, the quality of the strategy, the practical implementation plans. If you can execute even 80% of what you've outlined here, you'll have transformed how TechCore operates. Thank you, I managed. Don't thank me yet, because now comes the hard part. She stood. You've proven the department deserves to exist. Now you need to prove you can actually implement these changes. You have 6 months. I want quarterly check-ins, measurable progress markers, and results that justify your budget. You'll have them. I'm sure I will. Jennifer doesn't make bad bets. She smiled, the first genuine warmth I'd seen from her. Welcome to TechCore, Mr. Chen. Try not to make us regret this. The room emptied slowly. Executives filing out, talking amongst themselves. Several pausing to shake my hand or offer words of encouragement that felt surreal after a month of wondering if I'd even survive. Michael Torres was last. You surprised me, he said simply. I don't like being surprised. But in this case, I'll make an exception. He extended his hand. Good work. Now do it again every quarter for the next year, and we'll call it a success. When he left, it was just my team and Jennifer. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Sarah started laughing. Not polite laughter, not relieved laughter. The kind of hysterical, exhausted, disbelieving laughter that comes from having survived something you weren't entirely sure you would. We did it, she said. Holy shit! We actually did it! Language, James said, but he was grinning. Fuck language. We just pitched the executive committee of a multi-billion-dollar company and they loved it. Loved it. Patricia Chen said it was the best operational analysis she's seen in 20 years. 20 years. The team erupted. Hugs, high fives, the kind of celebration that comes from shared trauma and shared triumph. I stood apart for a moment, watching them. These people who'd trusted me, who'd worked themselves to exhaustion because I'd asked them to, who'd believed in a vision I wasn't always sure I believed in myself. Jennifer appeared at my elbow. Told you, she said quietly. You'd already won. This just made it official. Thank you. For the chance. For believing when no one else did. For, stop. You did the work. I just opened the door. What you did with that opportunity. That's all you. She checked her watch. It's 12:47. You know what that means? I did. Richard's deadline had passed. 1 month plus 47 minutes since I'd walked out of my in-laws' house. 1 month plus 47 minutes since Richard Kane had prophesied my failure. And I was still standing. Not just standing, thriving. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, expecting Melissa. It was Richard. I assume you're pleased with yourself. Enjoy it while it lasts. You got lucky. Luck runs out. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed my response. It wasn't luck. It was work. The kind of work you never thought I was capable of. But thanks for the motivation. I couldn't have done it without you showing me exactly who I didn't want to become. I hit send. Then I did something I should have done weeks ago. I blocked his number. The team went out for drinks at 2 p.m. day drinking, felt earned after a month of hell and a presentation that had exceeded every expectation. I joined them for one drink, raised a toast to their brilliance, and then excused myself. I had a phone call to make. Found a quiet corner of the bar. Dialed Melissa. She answered on the first ring. Well, they loved it. Her scream of joy was loud enough that several people in the bar turned to stare. I knew it. I knew you'd kill it. Oh my God. David, I'm so proud of you. So incredibly proud. What did they say? Tell me everything. I told her. The presentation, the questions, Patricia's response, Michael's surprise. All of it spilled out in a rush of words and relief and the kind of bone-deep satisfaction that comes from proving you were worth the investment. And Richard? She asked when I finished. When she asked one. Front she asked one. Free side. Rounder. One she asked one. One she asked one. One she asked one. One she asked one. He texted. Said I got lucky. Of course he did. What did you say? That it wasn't luck. Then I blocked his number. Melissa was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. You blocked him? I did. I'm done letting him have space in my head. Done giving his opinion weight. Done proving anything to him. He doesn't deserve that power over me anymore. David, I spent 3 years trying to earn his approval. A month proving I didn't need it. And you know what? I don't. I never did. The only person I needed to prove anything to was myself. She was crying now. I could hear it in her breath. I love you, she said. I love you so much it hurts. And I can't wait to get to Denver and start our life. Our real life. The one we choose. Not the one your father dictated or expected or tried to destroy. 8 days, I said. 8 days. I stayed at the bar another hour, soaking in my team's celebration, feeling the weight of the past month finally lift from my shoulders. Then I walked back to my apartment through Denver streets that felt less foreign, less temporary, less like exile, and more like home. The sun was setting. The mountains were doing that purple-orange thing that probably appeared on every postcard sold in the city. The air was cool but not cold, carrying the promise of a spring that was finally ready to commit. My phone buzzed. Not Richard this time, he was blocked. Exiled to whatever corner of reality held people whose opinions no longer mattered. It was Jennifer. The board approved expanding your budget for Q2. Congratulations. You've officially made me look like a genius. You are a genius. I'm just the person who proved it. Take the weekend. Rest. Monday, we start implementation. And David, thank you for making me right about you. I sat on a bench in the same park where I'd sat yesterday, phone in hand, watching the sky change colors. 1 month ago, I'd been fired, humiliated, manipulated into corporate espionage by my father-in-law's cruel machinations. 1 month ago, I'd felt small and inadequate and not good enough. 1 month ago, Richard Kane had told me I'd come crawling back within 30 days. And now? Now I had a department, a team, a future, a wife who'd chosen me over her family, a career that was finally mine to shape. Now I had proof not for Richard, but for myself that I was more than anyone's low expectations. I pulled up my messages, started typing. To Melissa, Day 1 of month 2. Let's see how long it takes your father to realize he lost. She responded immediately, Forever. He'll never admit it, but we'll know. That's what matters. She was right. The deadline had passed, and I was still standing. Victory, I learned, doesn't feel like the movies suggest. There's no slow-motion celebration, no swelling orchestral score, no freeze frame of triumphant fists in the air. Instead, it feels like walking out of a burning building, relief mixed with disbelief, mixed with the nagging suspicion that you're still on fire and just haven't noticed yet. The weekend after the presentation passed in a fog of sleep and takeout and the kind of numbness that comes from a month of adrenaline suddenly having nowhere to go. I slept 14 hours on Friday night, woke up Saturday, convinced I'd missed some critical deadline, checked my phone obsessively for emails that never came, and finally accepted that maybe, just maybe, I was allowed to rest. Sunday, I did laundry. Mundane, domestic, beautifully boring laundry. Watching clothes spin in circles felt like meditation. After weeks of watching my career spin in circles and wondering which cycle would finally break me. My phone rang around 3 p.m. My mother, David, sweetheart, how are you? Her voice carried that particular warmth that only mothers can manufacture, the kind that makes you simultaneously feel 5 years old and completely safe. Your father and I have been worried. You haven't called in 2 weeks. Guilt hit immediately. I'd been so consumed with survival that I'd forgotten about the people who'd loved me long before I had anything to prove. I'm sorry, Mom. Work has been intense, but it's good, really good, actually. Tell me everything. So I did. Not the Richard parts. She knew enough about my father-in-law to fill in those blanks herself, but the job, the team, the presentation, the victory that still didn't feel entirely real. She listened the way mothers do, with small sounds of encouragement and pride that somehow communicated more than words. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Your father wants to talk to you," she said finally. "Mom, just for a minute. Please." The phone shuffled. My father's voice came through, gruff and uncomfortable with emotion the way he'd always been. "Son, Dad, your mother's been filling me in. Sounds like you've had quite a month." "That's one way to put it. I want you to know something." He cleared his throat. "When you called to tell us you were leaving, taking this job, moving to Denver, I was scared. Not because I didn't believe in you, but because I know how the world works. I know how men like Richard Kane operate, and I was terrified he'd broken something in you that couldn't be fixed." My throat tightened. "But you proved me wrong," he continued. "Proved him wrong too. And I couldn't be prouder if I tried. You did what I never had the courage to do. You took a risk. You bet on yourself. That takes real strength, David. The kind of strength that has nothing to do with money or power or anything Richard Kane understands." "Thanks, Dad. Your mother and I are thinking of visiting. Once Melissa gets settled, we want to see this new life you're building." "I'd like that." After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand, feeling something shift in my chest. My parents had never been wealthy. My father had taught high school history for 30 years. My mother had worked as a librarian. They'd given me a childhood of love and stability, and the radical belief that being kind mattered more than being powerful. Richard had looked at them with barely concealed contempt during our wedding planning, made comments about humble beginnings and simple people that were meant to wound, and I'd let it happen. Let him dismiss the people who'd shaped me because I was too desperate for his approval to defend them. Not anymore. Monday morning came too quickly, and not quickly enough. The office felt different now. People I'd never spoken to stopped me in hallways to congratulate the presentation. Several VPs sent emails requesting consultations with my team. The CFO, Michael Torres, who'd been skeptical until I'd proven otherwise, added me to executive leadership email chains with the casual assumption that I belonged there. It was surreal. "You're famous," Sarah said when I arrived at our department's designated area. We'd been upgraded from a conference room with temporary furniture to an actual suite with offices, proper desks, windows that looked out over Denver instead of fluorescent-lit corridors. "I'm not famous. I'm just not immediately failing." Semantics. She was organizing files on her new desk, looking far too energized for 8 a.m. on a Monday. "James wants to start implementation on the product development workflow this week." I told him we should probably, breathe for a minute first. He told me breathing is for people without quarterly targets. He's not wrong. He's exhausting. But she was smiling. "So, what's the plan? How do we translate a brilliant presentation into actual results?" That was the question, wasn't it? Presenting strategy is one thing. Executing it is something else entirely. It's the difference between drawing a map and actually walking the terrain, between knowing what should work and making it work in a real organization with real people who have real resistance to change. "We start small," I said. "Pick one initiative, implement it perfectly, show measurable results. Then, we use that success to build momentum for the bigger changes." The product development workflow. Exactly. It's visible. It has executive buy-in after our presentation, and the timeline is concrete enough that success will be obvious. Sarah pulled up her laptop. "Then let's build the implementation plan." We spent the morning in strategy sessions. My team filtered in over the next few hours, each bringing their particular expertise. By lunch, we had a 12-week implementation roadmap with weekly milestones, stakeholder check-ins, and contingency plans for 17 different ways the project could implode. It felt good. Purposeful. Like we were finally doing the work we'd been hired for, instead of just proving we deserved to do it. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. Officially gave my 2 weeks' notice. My boss cried. My coworkers are throwing me a going-away party Friday. My mother called 3 times asking if I was really doing this. 6 more days until I'm there. Me. 6 days until our real life starts. You getting nervous? Terrified. What if Denver me is different from home me? What if we've both changed too much in 5 weeks? Then we'll change together. That's what marriage is, right? Choosing each other every day, even when we're different than we were yesterday? She was right. Of course she was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally continued to be 2 separate countries. And I was still learning the language of the latter. Wednesday brought the first real test. The product development VP, Greg Martinez, the one who'd agreed to pilot our new workflow called an emergency meeting. When a VP calls something an emergency, you show up immediately and hope it's not your head on the chopping block. I arrived at his office to find him staring at his computer screen with the expression of a man watching his house burn down. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? The kind where my team is in open rebellion about the workflow changes. I just got a petition signed by 17 engineers saying the new process will compromise quality and they refuse to implement it. Of course, because nothing worth doing is ever easy, and the universe has a sick sense of timing. Can I see the petition? He spun his monitor around. It was thorough, I'd give them that. Point-by-point breakdown of their concerns, citing specific stages in the old workflow they believed were critical, arguing that streamlining would create gaps in quality control. It was also wrong. Not maliciously wrong, but wrong born from comfort and fear of change and the very human tendency to conflate the way we've always done it with the right way. "Give me 24 hours, I said. "David, 24 hours. I'll meet with your engineers, address every concern in this petition, and either modify the workflow to account for legitimate issues or demonstrate why their concerns are based on misunderstanding the new process." Greg studied me. "You're that confident?" "I'm that thorough. We didn't build this strategy in a vacuum. We analyzed your current process down to individual email threads. We know where the inefficiencies are. But if your team has legitimate concerns we missed, I want to hear them. And if they're just resistant to change, then we'll show them why change is necessary. With data, with respect, with the understanding that they're not wrong to be cautious about quality. They're just wrong about this specific solution." He nodded slowly. Thursday morning, conference room B. I'll have my team there. But David, if you can't win them over, the whole project dies. I won't force my engineers to implement something they fundamentally oppose. Understood. I spent the rest of Wednesday and all of Thursday morning preparing. Pulled every piece of analysis we'd done on product development. Built a presentation that addressed each petition point individually. Ran it by Sarah, who found 3 holes I'd missed. Fixed those. Ran it again by James, who suggested I lead with empathy rather than data. You're going to walk into a room of hostile engineers who think you're an outsider, telling them how to do their jobs? He said. If you lead with numbers, you've already lost. Lead with understanding. Show them you respect their concerns, then bury them with evidence. Smart. This was why I'd hired people smarter than me. Thursday morning, conference room B was packed. Not just the 17 petition signers. 30-plus engineers, all looking at me with varying degrees of skepticism, hostility, and the particular exhaustion that comes from being told to attend yet another meeting about changes they didn't ask for. Greg sat in the corner, arms crossed, expression neutral. This was my show. Thank you for coming, I started. I know you're busy. I know the last thing you want is another consultant. You're not a consultant, someone interrupted. Young guy, early 20s maybe, with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong on the internet. Consultants leave. You're here permanently, which makes this worse. Fair point. You're right. I'm not a consultant. I'm the person who's been hired to make TechCore more efficient. Which means I'm either going to make your lives better or worse, and right now you're assuming worse. Murmurs of agreement. So let's talk about why. I pulled up the first slide. The current product development workflow, in all its spaghetti diagram glory. This is what you're currently doing. 127 days. From concept to prototype approval. 7 approval stages. 4 redundant checkpoints, where different people are reviewing for the same criteria at different times. Those checkpoints catch critical errors, a woman in the front said. She looked senior, maybe 15 years at TechCore, the kind of engineer who'd seen every disaster that could happen and had the scars to prove it. They do, I agreed. Absolutely they do. Which is why the new workflow doesn't eliminate quality checkpoints. It eliminates redundant ones. I walked them through it, slide by slide, concern by concern from their petition, showed them where the old process had multiple people checking the same criteria, demonstrated how the new process consolidated those checks without losing rigor, pulled up case studies from other companies who'd implemented similar changes and seen quality improve because reviewers weren't spreading their attention across redundant stages. But what about the Stage 4 technical review? Someone asked. That's where we catch integration issues. Stage 4 inches, the old process, was happening after Stage 3 architecture review, meaning if there were integration issues, you were catching them after the architecture was already approved. In the new process, we've combined those into a single comprehensive review that happens earlier, so integration issues are caught before you've invested time in flawed architecture. More questions, more answers, back and forth for 90 minutes, with me demonstrating that we hadn't just cut stages arbitrarily. We'd redesigned the workflow based on where inefficiencies actually existed versus where they were necessary rigor. Finally, the senior engineer in the front raised her hand. I was one of the people who signed the petition, she said. I've been at TechCore for 17 years. I've seen a dozen efficiency initiatives come through here, all promising to make things better, most making them worse, and I was ready to hate this. My heart sank. But, she smiled slightly, this is the first time anyone has actually understood our process well enough to improve it, rather than just speed it up. You're not cutting corners. You're cutting redundancy. There's a difference. One, quote, the room shifted. I felt it that moment, when resistance starts cracking into possibility. I'm not saying I love this, she continued. Change is scary, and quality is my religion, but I'm willing to try the pilot. And if it works, if quality maintains or improves and timeline decreases, then I'll be the first to admit I was wrong to oppose it. Others nodded. The young guy who'd called me out earlier raised his hand. One condition, he said. Name it. If quality suffers, if we find critical issues that the old workflow would have caught, you admit the mistake and we revert. No ego, no doubling down. Just honest assessment and willingness to adjust. Agreed. I meant it. This isn't about me being right. It's about finding the best way forward. If the data shows the new workflow isn't working, we iterate until it does. Greg stood up. Sounds like we have a pilot. 4 projects through the new workflow. Monthly quality metrics compared against historical averages. If it works, we scale. If it doesn't, we adjust. Everyone good with that? The room wasn't unanimous. Some engineers still looked skeptical, a few outright hostile, but enough heads nodded that Greg called it a consensus. After the meeting, the senior engineer approached me. Rebecca, she said, extending her hand. I lead the architecture team. David, I lead the department that's currently making your life complicated." She laughed. "You handled that well. Most people in your position would have come in defensive, treating us like obstacles instead of resources. You listened. That matters. I spent 3 years in middle management, being ignored by people who should have listened. I'm not going to do that to someone else." "Good principle to have." She paused. "Can I give you some advice?" "Please. The work you're doing, it's good, important, but you're moving fast, and fast can be dangerous in a big organization. People need time to adapt, to grieve what's changing, to see evidence before they believe. Don't mistake their caution for obstruction." "I won't." "Good. Because if you burn out your credibility chasing speed, all this good work dies when you leave." She smiled. "And I'd like you to stick around. TechCore needs people who actually know what they're doing." Thursday night, I called Melissa from my apartment, eating leftover Thai food and feeling the particular exhaustion that comes from winning battles you didn't know you'd have to fight. 4 more days, she said. Her voice sounded different, lighter, like she'd shed some weight I hadn't realized she'd been carrying. 4 more days until you're here. Then what? Then we figure out our life. Together. No more parents dictating what success looks like. No more trying to fit into molds other people made for us. Just us, building something that's ours. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Of what?" "That I've changed too much. That the man you married doesn't exist anymore. That I've become so focused on proving myself that I've forgotten how to just be." Melissa was quiet for a moment. In the background, I could hear the sounds of her packing tape on boxes, the rustle of bubble wrap, the dismantling of a life to build a new one. "David," she said finally, "you haven't changed. You've just stopped hiding. The man I married was always this capable, this strong, this brilliant. You just didn't believe it yet. My father spent 3 years trying to convince you that you were less than you are. All you've done is remember the truth." "You really believe that?" "I married you knowing who you were. My father made me doubt that choice. But I was right the first time. I've always been right about you." After we hung up, I sat with those words. I was right the first time. Maybe that was the real victory. Not the presentation, not the executive approval, not the blocked number or the deadline I'd survived. Maybe the real victory was believing I'd been worth believing in all along. Friday afternoon, Jennifer called me into her office. "Sit," she said, which was never a good sign. I sat. "I've been getting feedback about your meeting with Greg's engineering team yesterday." My stomach tightened. "And?" "And apparently you won over 17 hostile engineers through sheer competence and willingness to listen." Rebecca Chang, one of our most senior and skeptical engineers, called me personally to say, "You might be the first person in executive leadership who actually understands what her team does." The relief was physical. That's good then. It's very good. It's also exhausting to watch. Jennifer leaned back in her chair. "David, you're working like someone who's still trying to prove they deserve to be here. You've proven it. Multiple times. At some point, you need to accept that you belong and stop operating in survival mode." "I'm not in survival mode." "You're working 16-hour days. You personally addressed every concern in a petition from engineers who weren't even in your department. You're treating every small challenge like it's the executive presentation all over again." She softened. "You won. You can relax now." "Can I?" "Because it feels like the moment I relax, the moment I stop being perfect, someone will remember I was fired from my last job and decide this was all a mistake." "David." Jennifer's voice was firm now. "That's Richard Kane talking. That's the voice he put in your head. And you need to recognize it for what it is, poison. You're not one mistake away from failure. You're a senior director at a major tech company with a team that would follow you off a cliff and executive leadership that's impressed by your work. Start acting like it. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing something and feeling something continued to be those two separate countries, and I was still struggling with the visa requirements. Melissa arrives Monday, I said, instead of addressing her point. Good. Take the day off. Pick her up from the airport. Get settled. Come back Tuesday with some perspective that doesn't involve proving yourself to ghosts. Ghosts? Richard Kane, your old job. Every person who ever made you feel inadequate. They're ghosts, David, and you're letting them haunt you when you should be living. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety this time, just from the strange, liminal feeling of standing between who you were and who you're becoming, unsure which version you're supposed to be. I pulled up my phone, stared at my blocked numbers list. Richard's number sat there like a gravestone, dead, but not quite buried. I could unblock him, could see if he'd tried to contact me, if he'd sent follow-up messages to his luck runs out prediction, could engage with whatever new manipulation or dismissal he'd crafted. Or I could leave him blocked, leave him in the past where he belonged. I put the phone down. 4 days, until Melissa arrived. 4 days until the next chapter started. 4 days until I had to figure out how to be a husband again instead of just a man proving points to people who'd never believe him anyway. Outside my window, Denver glowed with Friday night energy. Somewhere in this city, people were living their lives without deadlines or prophecies or the weight of other people's expectations. Somewhere in this city, there was a version of me who knew how to do that too. I just had to find him. Monday morning arrived wrapped in the kind of perfect Colorado sunshine that makes you believe in fresh starts. I'd taken Jennifer's advice, demanded it, really, when she'd personally blocked my calendar and sent an email to my team saying I was unavailable for family matters. The phrase felt strange. Family had always meant obligation, performance, the exhausting theater of being enough for people who'd decided you weren't. But today, family meant Melissa. Her flight landed at 11:47 a.m. I arrived at the airport an hour early because anxiety and excitement are cousins who refuse to be separated. Spent 60 minutes pacing the arrivals area, watching strangers reunite with loved ones, witnessing the particular joy of people who'd been separated, finding each other again. Would we find each other again? 5 weeks apart. 5 weeks of phone calls and texts, and the growing distance between the people we'd been and the people we were becoming. 5 weeks of her in our old apartment, surrounded by her family and the weight of choosing me over them. 5 weeks of me in Denver, building a life she hadn't been part of yet. What if the space between us had grown too wide to cross? 11:43, 4 minutes. My phone buzzed. Sarah, checking in. How are you holding up? Terrified. Good. Terrified or bad terrified? Is there a difference? Yes. Good terrified means you care. Bad terrified means you're catastrophizing. Which one? Me. Both? Fair. Go be with your wife. Stop overthinking. We'll survive without you for 24 hours. The flight status board updated. Arrived. My heart rate tripled. Passengers started trickling through the arrivals gate. Business travelers in suits, families with exhausted children, college students with oversized backpacks. I scanned every face, looking for the one that had lived in my phone screen for 5 weeks, but not in my arms. Then I saw her. Melissa emerged, pulling 2 suitcases, hair pulled back in the messy bun she wore when she was stressed, wearing my old college sweatshirt that she'd stolen years ago and never returned. She looked tired, beautiful. Lost in the way people look when they've just jumped off a cliff and aren't sure if they'll fly or fall. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she dropped her suitcase handles and ran. I met her halfway, catching her as she launched herself at me, arms around my neck, face buried in my shoulder. She was crying. I was crying. We were both laughing and crying and holding on like we might disappear if we let go. "You're here," I managed. "I'm here. You're really here. I'm really here." She pulled back just enough to look at me, hands on either side of my face. "God, you look different. Thinner, older, tired. Flattering, honest." She kissed me. Not the goodbye kiss from 5 weeks ago, but something hungrier, more desperate, the kiss of two people who'd forgotten what it felt like to be close. Our apartment or our apartment, our new apartment, our life. Take me there. The drive from the airport was quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet, just the silence of two people who'd spent 5 weeks talking through phones and screens, rediscovering what it meant to simply exist in the same space. Melissa's hand found mine on the center console. I laced our fingers together and drove with one hand, feeling the reality of her presence settle into my bones. "Tell me about Denver," she said eventually. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. The parts you couldn't explain over the phone. The feeling of the city. The rhythm of your days. The version of you that exists here." So I told her. About the mountains that surprised you by being visible from random street corners. About the coffee shop 3 blocks from our apartment that made terrible coffee but had the best pastries. About the light rail system I'd learned to navigate. The parks I'd discovered. The particular energy of a city that felt younger and hungrier than the one we'd left. About the loneliness of building a life without her in it. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "for not being here sooner, for making you do this alone. You had to tie up your life, I understand." "Do you?" "Because I chose to stay an extra 3 weeks. I could have left sooner, but I was scared. Scared of making it real. Scared of actually choosing you over my family in a way I couldn't take back." She squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry I made you question whether I'd come at all." "I never questioned." "David, you're a terrible liar. I could hear it in your voice every time we talked. That fear. That I'd change my mind. That I'd decide blood was thicker than marriage. That my father would convince me to stay." She wasn't wrong. "Did he try?" I asked. Melissa laughed, but it was bitter. "Try?" He orchestrated a full campaign. Dinner parties where he coincidentally invited eligible bachelor sons of his business associates. Job offers with salaries that would make your eyes water. Conversations about how I was throwing away my future for a man who got lucky once but won't again. My mother crying about how she'd never see me. How I was choosing a man over family. How she didn't raise me to abandon my roots. Jesus. Yeah. She stared out the window at Denver passing by. The final straw was last Tuesday. My father invited me to lunch. Said he wanted to apologize, to make peace before I left. So I went. Stupid, I know. But some part of me still hoped he could be the father I needed, instead of the one he's always been. What happened? He offered me a job, VP of Operations at Kane Industries. My own department, executive salary, direct report to him. Said all I had to do was delay the Denver move for 6 months. Just 6 months, to see if you could actually make it without me there as a safety net. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. He actually said that? Safety net? His exact words were, "Let's see if David can survive without the Kane family resources propping him up." Like you hadn't already survived. Like you hadn't already succeeded. Like 5 weeks of you thriving in Denver without any help from him wasn't proof enough. She turned to look at me. I threw my wine in his face. "You what?" "Threw my wine in his face. In the middle of that stupidly expensive restaurant he loves, in front of 3 of his business associates, I picked up my glass of Cabernet and threw it directly at his smug, manipulative face. I had to pull over, had to stop the car because I was laughing too hard to drive safely. Melissa, he was soaked. Wine dripping down his $3,000 suit, sputtering like a fish, while everyone in the restaurant stared. And I stood up and I said very calmly, very clearly, I'm choosing David. Not because he needs me to prop him up, but because he's the only person in my life who's never made me feel like I had to earn love through compliance. Then I left, stuck him with the bill. I couldn't stop laughing. That's incredible. You're incredible. I'm also now officially disowned. My father sent a formal email last Thursday severing financial ties and removing me from the family trust. My mother called crying, saying I've broken her heart. My brother, who I barely talk to anyway, sent a text saying, I've always been dramatic. She smiled, but her eyes were wet. So, here I am. No trust fund, no family safety net, no backup plan, just me and 2 suitcases, and the belief that choosing you was choosing right. I pulled her across the center console, kissed her hard, tasted salt from her tears and something else, freedom, maybe, or the particular flavor of burned bridges that you're glad to watch burn. I love you, I said against her lips. I love you so much, it actually hurts. Good, because you're stuck with me now. The apartment felt different with Melissa in it. Not just occupied, but alive. She walked through the rooms, touching things, the furniture I'd barely noticed, the kitchen I'd used only for coffee and takeout containers, the bedroom that had been a place to collapse rather than rest. It's nice, she said finally. Temporary furniture, nice, but nice. We can get different furniture. Make it ours. Can we afford that? I mean, I know you tripled your salary, but I don't have a job yet. I gave my notice, but I didn't line anything up here. I jumped. And now I'm realizing maybe I should have looked before I leaped. The vulnerability in her voice made my chest ache. Melissa, look at me. I took her hands. We can afford it. We can afford furniture, rent, food, whatever we need. And you'll find a job. You're brilliant at what you do. But even if it takes time, even if it's tight for a while, we'll be okay. We're not going into this unprepared. Aren't we though? I left my job, my family, my entire support system to follow you to a city where I know literally no one. That's pretty much the definition of unprepared. She wasn't wrong. But she also wasn't seeing what I saw. That preparation isn't the same as readiness. That sometimes you have to jump before you know where you'll land. You left a family that used love as leverage, I said carefully. A job where you'd hit the ceiling unless your father cleared the way. A city where Richard Kane's shadow touched everything. You didn't jump unprepared, Mel. You jumped free. She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. Free. I can work with free. We spent the afternoon like newlyweds, discovering each other. Melissa unpacked while I made coffee, real coffee, not the automated desperation I'd been surviving on. We hung her clothes in the closet next to mine, the act somehow more intimate than it should have been. Merged our toiletries in the bathroom, her expensive skincare mixing with my drugstore basics. We need to go grocery shopping, she said, staring into the nearly empty refrigerator. David, you have condiments and beer. That's not food. There's leftover Thai from Thursday. It's Monday. That's biological warfare, not food. We went to the grocery store, wandered the aisles like tourists in a foreign country, buying vegetables I'd forgotten existed, bread that wasn't pre-sliced, ingredients for meals we'd actually cook instead of order. At checkout, I caught Melissa staring at the total with an expression I couldn't quite read. What? I asked. We just spent $200 on groceries, and you didn't even blink. A year ago, $200 in groceries would have been a discussion, a negotiation. A reminder from my father about living within your means. We're not living within his means anymore. We're living within ours. She kissed me in the parking lot. Grocery bags at our feet. Denver sunshine warming us both. I could get used to this. Good, because you're stuck with it. That night, we cooked together for the first time in 5 weeks. Pasta with vegetables, nothing fancy, the kind of simple meal that becomes special because of who you're sharing it with. We sat at the small dining table in the apartment, eating food we'd made together, drinking wine that didn't cost more than our monthly utilities, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. Tell me about your team, Melissa said. The people you've been working with. So I did. Sarah's brilliance and sass, James's brutal honesty and loyalty, Rebecca, the engineer, who'd gone from hostile to ally in 90 minutes, Jennifer's mentorship that had saved me more times than I could count. They sound like family, Melissa said. They are. A different kind of family. The kind you choose. The best kind. She twirled pasta on her fork. I want to meet them, not as your wife making an obligatory appearance, but as someone who's part of your life here. This life we're building. They want to meet you too. Sarah's been asking when you'd arrive since week 1. Said she needs to vet the woman who'd marry someone as intense as you. I like her already. After dinner, we stood at the window, looking out at Denver's skyline. The mountains were purple silhouettes against the darkening sky, the city lights beginning to compete with the last of the sunset. Do you regret it? Melissa asked quietly. Leaving? Coming here? All of it? No. Not even a little? I thought about it. The loneliness, the pressure, the fear of failing that still woke me at 3 a.m. sometimes. The weight of knowing my success or failure would justify or condemn Melissa's choice to follow me. Not even a little, I said. You? She leaned into me, her back against my chest, my arms around her waist. Ask me in a month. When the newness wears off and I'm still unemployed and we're eating ramen because groceries are expensive and I'm missing my mother despite everything. Fair. But right now, I'm exactly where I want to be. Tuesday, I brought Melissa to the office. Not officially, she wasn't starting a job or anything formal, but I wanted her to see the space I'd been occupying, to meet the people who'd become my lifeline, to understand the world I'd been building while we were apart. The team was waiting in our department suite when we arrived. Sarah stood up first, extending her hand with a grin. You must be the woman who threw wine at Richard Kane. I've been dying to meet you. Melissa blinked. How do you... David told us at happy hour last week. You're officially a legend. I'm Sarah, by the way. The person who keeps your husband from working himself to death. Thank you for that. James introduced himself next, then the rest of the team, each offering welcomes that felt genuine rather than obligatory. They asked about her move, her background, what she was looking for job-wise in Denver. Within 20 minutes, Sarah was texting Melissa contact information for people in her field. James was offering to introduce her to his wife, who worked in similar industry, and the whole team had basically adopted her. Your people are good people, Melissa whispered to me, while Sarah was showing her the whiteboards where we'd mapped the product development workflow. They are. You're different here. More relaxed. More yourself. Was I? I hadn't noticed. But maybe that was the point. When you're not performing for people who've already decided you're inadequate, you get to just exist. Jennifer appeared in the doorway mid-morning. You must be Melissa, she said, extending her hand. Jennifer Walsh. I'm the person who bet on your husband when everyone else thought I was crazy. Thank you, Melissa said simply, for seeing what I've always seen. It wasn't hard. He did all the heavy lifting. Jennifer turned to me. I need to steal you both for lunch. There's someone I want Melissa to meet. Lunch was at a downtown restaurant, with views that cost as much as the food. The someone Jennifer wanted Melissa to meet was Patricia Chen, TechCore's CEO. I heard you were in town, Patricia said after we'd ordered, and I wanted to meet the woman who convinced David to take a chance on us. I think it was the other way around, Melissa said. Was it? Because from what I understand, you sacrificed quite a bit to be here. Left your job, your family, your entire support system. That's not following a career opportunity. That's believing in a person. Melissa glanced at me, then back to Patricia. I'm still figuring out what I believe in, honestly. But David I'm sure about. Patricia smiled. Good, because we're sure about him too. And Jennifer tells me you're looking for work in operations consulting? I am. We have an opening. Senior Consultant, Strategic Initiatives. It's a new role, working across departments to implement large-scale changes. Normally, I wouldn't conduct job interviews over lunch. But she pulled out her phone, opened an email, slid it across the table to Melissa. Your resume is impressive. Your references even more so. And frankly, anyone who can stand up to Richard Kane the way I've heard you did has exactly the spine we need for this position. Melissa stared at the email, then at Patricia, then at me. Is this real? Very real, Patricia said. Salary range is included in the email. Benefits too. You'd be starting on Jennifer's team, which means you'd be working adjacent to David's department but not directly with him. No nepotism, no conflicts of interest. Just two talented people who happen to be married. Melissa looked overwhelmed. I need to think about it. Of course. Take the week. Talk it over. But Melissa? Patricia leaned forward. TechCore values courage, intelligence, integrity. You demonstrated all three by being here. We'd be lucky to have you. After lunch, walking back to the office, Melissa grabbed my arm. Did you set that up? No. I swear, I had no idea Patricia was going to. Because if this is pity, if this is them doing you a favor, it's not. Patricia doesn't do favors. She builds teams, and she clearly sees something in you that makes you valuable independent of me. Melissa was quiet for several blocks. The salary they're offering is $15,000 more than I was making before. It's a good salary. David, it's more than I thought I'd make for another 5 years. And they're just offering it like it's normal. Like I didn't just implode my entire professional network by leaving. Maybe that's what it's like when people value you for your actual abilities instead of your last name. She stopped walking, turned to face me on the sidewalk, Denver moving around us like we were stones in a stream. Is this real? She asked. This life? This city? This version of us that gets to just be good at things and be valued for it? I think so. I'm still figuring it out too. Okay, she nodded, decision solidifying in her eyes. Okay, let's figure it out together. That night, Melissa called her mother. I gave her privacy, went to the bedroom while she sat in the living room, phone in hand, trying to rebuild at least one bridge that her father had tried to burn. I could hear the conversation through the door, not words, just tones. Melissa's voice alternating between firm and gentle, Catherine's responses too quiet to make out. It went on for an hour. When Melissa finally came to bed, her eyes were red. She said she's happy, I'm happy, but she can't go against my father, can't have a relationship with me if it means betraying him. Family loyalty, she said. As if that only goes one direction. I pulled her close. I'm sorry. Don't be. She made her choice. I made mine. We both have to live with it. We lay in the darkness, Denver's ambient light filtering through the curtains, holding each other like we were the only solid things in a world that kept shifting. David? Yeah? Thank you for being worth it, for making this leap worth taking. You're worth it too. Every risk, every sacrifice, every burned bridge, you're worth it. She kissed me. We made love like people rediscovering each other, slow and deliberate and grateful. Afterward, as we lay tangled together, Melissa whispered, I'm going to take the job. Yeah? Yeah, because fuck it. Fuck playing small. Fuck living in my father's shadow. Fuck every voice that said I couldn't make it without the Kane family name. That's my girl. Damn right it is. Outside, Denver slept. Inside, we began to build the life we'd chosen over the one we'd inherited. Together. Finally. 3 weeks after Melissa arrived, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was in my office reviewing implementation metrics for the product development workflow, 63 days from concept to prototype on the first project through the new system, a full 10 days faster than our projection. Rebecca's team was thrilled. Greg Martinez had already requested we roll out the changes to 2 more product lines. Success tasted like vindication. The unknown number rang again. I almost ignored it. Too many spam calls, too little time. But something made me answer. David Chen. Mr. Chen. This is Marcus Webb from Industry Innovations Conference. We're hosting our annual Operations Leadership Summit in Chicago next month, and we'd like to extend an invitation for you to speak on a panel about operational transformation in tech companies. I blinked. I'm sorry. What? We've been following the work you're doing at TechCore. Your approach to streamlining workflows while maintaining quality metrics has generated significant interest in the industry. We'd be honored to have you share your insights. How did you even hear about this? Jennifer Walsh is on our advisory board. She's been quite vocal about the innovative work your department is producing. He paused. We'd cover travel, accommodation, and offer a modest speaking fee. The panel would include operations leaders from Microsoft, Amazon, and Kane Industries. My stomach dropped. Kane Industries? Yes, Richard Kane himself will be on the panel. We thought it would make for interesting dialogue, different approaches to operational efficiency, varying company sizes and cultures. Is that a problem? Was it a problem that I'd be on a panel with my father-in-law who'd manipulated me into corporate espionage, engineered my firing, and prophesied my failure? The man I'd blocked from my phone and my life? No problem, I heard myself say. Send me the details. After I hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen, not seeing the metrics anymore. Richard. I'd spent 3 weeks in a bubble of success and newlywed happiness, convinced I'd moved past him. But hearing his name had triggered something, not fear exactly, but that old familiar need to prove something. To show him. You okay? Sarah appeared in my doorway. You look like you've seen a ghost. Close. I just got invited to speak at a conference. Industry Innovations. Chicago next month. That's great. That's huge, actually. They only invite top tier. She stopped. Why do you look like someone died? Richard Kane is on the panel. Oh. She came in, closed the door behind her. Oh shit. Yeah. Are you going to do it? I should have said no. Should have declined politely. Focused on my work here. Avoided the inevitable confrontation. That would have been the mature choice. The healthy choice. Yes, I said. Why? Good question. Why was I choosing to walk back into Richard Kane's orbit after finally escaping it? What did I possibly have to gain? Because I need him to see it, I admitted. Not hear about it secondhand. Not imagine I might be succeeding. I need him to sit on a stage next to me. Listen to me speak about the work I'm doing. And know, absolutely know, that he was wrong about me. Sarah studied me for a long moment. That's either really healthy closure or really unhealthy obsession. I'm not sure which. Neither am I. Telling Melissa was harder. She'd started at TechCore the previous Monday, already making waves in strategic initiatives with her particular combination of diplomacy and ruthless efficiency. We'd fallen into a rhythm morning coffee together. Separate workdays in adjacent departments, evenings cooking dinner and pretending we were normal people with normal jobs and normal families. Chicago, she said when I told her that night over pasta. You're going to Chicago to be on a panel with my father. Is that okay? Is it okay? David, I threw wine at him and got disowned. I'm hardly the person to ask about healthy boundaries with Richard Kane. She set down her fork. But do you need to do this? Do you need to face him? I think so. I can't spend the rest of my career avoiding conferences because he might be there. And maybe I stopped, trying to articulate something I barely understood myself. Maybe I need to see him now, from this side of success, to know that I'm really free of him. Melissa nodded slowly. Then I'm coming with you. Mel, I'm coming. Not to support you. You don't need that. But because I need it too. I need to see him and feel nothing. No guilt, no obligation, no residual fear that I made the wrong choice. She reached across the table, took my hand. We face him together. Show him what we built. Then we walk away and never look back. He'll try to make it ugly. Of course he will. He's Richard Kane. Ugly is his love language. She smiled, but it was sharp. Let him try. We're not the same people he broke. We're the people who survived him. The next morning, I confirmed my attendance. Marcus Webb sent an email with the panel details. Operational excellence in the modern tech landscape. 4 speakers, 90 minutes. Moderated Q&A. My segment would focus on rapid organizational change and building high-performing teams. Richard's would focus on strategic operational integration during mergers and acquisitions. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing. Not just the panel presentation that was easy, just talking about work I'd been living and breathing for months, but preparing myself for seeing Richard again. For the inevitable confrontation. Jennifer noticed. You're wound tight, she said one afternoon, catching me in the break room stress-eating my 3rd granola bar. Big conference. It's not about the conference. She poured herself coffee, leaned against the counter. David, you don't have to prove anything to Richard Kane. You've already won. The job, the team, the results you've won. Going to Chicago won't change his opinion of you. Men like Richard don't admit they're wrong. I know. Do you? Because you're acting like this panel is some kind of final boss battle. It's not. It's just a conference. He's just a bitter old man who mistakes cruelty for strength. And you're a talented executive who's built something extraordinary. Those are facts. The panel doesn't change them. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing something intellectually and believing it emotionally were still 2 different countries, and I was still working on my visa. 2 days before the conference, Melissa and I packed for Chicago. Nervous? She asked, watching me obsessively check that I had the right adapters, the right clothes, the right everything. Terrified. Good terrified, or bad terrified. I smiled despite myself. Sarah asks me that too, because it's a good question. So which is it? Pervisetin. I thought about it, about seeing Richard again, about sitting on a stage next to the man who'd engineered my destruction and facing him as an equal rather than a subordinate. About Melissa beside me, choosing me again every day. Good terrified, I said finally. The kind that means I care about the outcome but know I'll survive regardless. Then we're ready. The flight to Chicago was smooth. We held hands during takeoff, Melissa reading a book about organizational change management, me reviewing my presentation notes for the 100th time. Somewhere in that plane, suspended between Denver and Chicago, between the life we'd built and the past we'd escaped, I felt something shift. Richard Kane didn't own my story anymore. I did. And in 48 hours, he was going to find out exactly what that meant. Chicago greeted us with rain. Not the gentle kind, the aggressive, wind-driven downpour that turns umbrellas into worthless accessories and makes you question every decision that led you to this moment. We arrived at the hotel, soaked, exhausted, and with 12 hours before the panel, that would put me face to face with Richard Kane for the first time since I'd walked out of his house with his prophecy echoing behind me. The hotel was the kind of luxury Richard would appreciate: marble lobbies, staff in uniforms that probably cost more than my first car, the ambient wealth that whispered rather than shouted. Conference attendees crowded the lobby, name tags and networking conversations, creating a hum of professional ambition. I saw him before he saw me. Richard Kane stood near the concierge desk, perfectly pressed suit, talking to two men I didn't recognize with that particular body language of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Older, maybe. A bit grayer, but fundamentally unchanged, still radiating that casual cruelty disguised as confidence. Melissa's hand tightened on mine. That's him. That's him. He looks smaller than I remember. She was right. Somehow, in the 8 weeks since I'd last seen him, Richard Kane had shrunk. Or maybe I'd grown. Maybe distance and success had given me perspective that proximity and desperation had denied. Do you want to? Melissa started. No, not yet. Let's check in first. We made it to the elevator without him seeing us. The doors closed, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. You okay? Melissa asked. I don't know. Seeing him, it brought back everything. That feeling of being inadequate, of not measuring up, of... Stop! She turned to face me fully. David, you're not that person anymore. You're a senior director at a major tech company. You built a department from scratch. You're speaking at a conference where he's just another panelist. You're not inadequate. You never were. The elevator dinged. Our floor. Say it, Melissa demanded. Say what? That you're not inadequate. Out loud. Say it. Mel, say it. I'm not inadequate. Louder. I'm not inadequate. Like you mean it. I'm not inadequate. The words echoed in the empty hallway. I'm not inadequate. I'm not unworthy. I'm not any of the things Richard Kane tried to make me believe I was. Melissa kissed me hard. Damn right you're not. Now let's shower, sleep, and tomorrow you're going to walk onto that stage and show him exactly who you are. The panel was scheduled for 10 a.m. I woke at 6, couldn't fall back asleep. Spent 2 hours reviewing notes I'd already memorized. Melissa ordered room service, coffee, eggs, the kind of breakfast meant to be fuel rather than pleasure. You're going to be brilliant, she said, watching me adjust my tie for the 5th time. What if I freeze? What if seeing him up close makes me forget everything? What if? Great. What if you trust yourself? What if you remember that you've already won? She stood, straightened my tie herself. Richard Kane is going to sit on that stage and listen to you speak about operational excellence, and every word is going to remind him that he was wrong. That's already happened. The panel is just making it public. We arrived at the conference center at 9:30. The panel room was already filling maybe 200 seats, industry professionals with notebooks and phones, the kind of audience that could make or break professional reputations. Marcus Webb found me backstage. David, glad you made it. The other panelists are in the green room. Have you met everyone? Not yet. Come on, I'll introduce you. The green room was exactly what you'd expect. Corporate beige, coffee that smelled burnt, nervous energy from people about to perform. 2 of the other panelists were already there, making small talk. Then Richard walked in. Our eyes met. For a moment, time stopped. I saw recognition flash across his face, followed by something else, surprise, maybe, or calculation. He recovered quickly, that executive mask sliding into place. David, he said, extending his hand like we were colleagues instead of combatants. What a pleasant surprise. I had no idea you'd be speaking. I shook his hand because refusing would have been petty. His grip was firm, practiced, the kind of handshake meant to establish dominance. Richard, good to see you. Is it? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I must say, I'm curious to hear what you'll be speaking about. Jennifer Walsh has been quite vocal about your work at TechCore. Impressive. Landing on your feet after your difficulty. That's one word for it. What would you call it? A learning experience. One that taught me a lot about who to trust. Marcus interrupted before Richard could respond, shepherding us toward the stage. Gentlemen, we're starting in 5 minutes. Time to take your seats. The stage was bright, the audience dark, beyond the lights. I took my designated seat second from the left, Richard at the far right. The moderator, a woman whose credentials took 30 seconds to read, welcomed everyone and outlined the panel structure. Then she turned to me. David, let's start with you. You've recently implemented significant operational changes at TechCore. Walk us through your approach to rapid organizational transformation. This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for. I looked at the audience. Then, deliberately, I looked at Richard. And I began to speak. 3 months ago, I was fired from my previous position. The audience shifted, surprised by the opening. Not for poor performance, not for ethical violations, but because I was manipulated into providing confidential information to a competitor who was positioning for an acquisition. I could feel Richard tense beside me. That experience taught me something crucial about operational excellence. It's not just about processes and efficiency. It's about trust, integrity, and building systems that can't be exploited by bad actors. I clicked to my first slide. At TechCore, I've been building an operations department with those principles at its core. I walked them through the workflow analysis, the team building, the measurable results, but I framed it all through the lens of learning from betrayal, of building systems with integrity, of creating environments where manipulation couldn't take root. Every word was professional, every example was legitimate, but the subtext was clear. I was talking about Richard Kane without ever saying his name. The audience was riveted. When I finished, the moderator turned to Richard. Richard, you've taken a different approach to operational integration, particularly during acquisitions. How do you respond to David's emphasis on trust-based systems? Richard's smile was tight. Trust is lovely in theory, but in practice, business is about leverage, understanding where vulnerabilities exist and using them strategically. That's not manipulation, that's intelligence. Even when that intelligence involves exploiting personal relationships? I asked before I could stop myself. The room went silent. Richard's eyes locked on mine. Especially then, people who can't separate personal feelings from professional strategy don't belong in executive leadership. Interesting perspective, I said evenly. In my experience, people who can't lead without exploitation don't belong in leadership at all. The moderator's eyes went wide. This was not the polite professional panel she'd planned. Gentlemen, she started, but Richard cut her off. David, tell the audience, how long did it take you to find employment after your firing? How many interviews? How desperate were you when Jennifer Walsh finally took pity on you? I received one offer, the first call I took, because someone saw potential instead of vulnerability. I turned to the audience. That's the difference between leaders who build and leaders who destroy. One creates opportunities, the other creates casualties. Richard stood. I think we're done here. Sit down, Richard, I said quietly. You wanted to see me fail, to prove I couldn't make it without crawling back to you. Well, here I am, not crawling, not failing, succeeding, and you can't stand it. He stared at me, jaw tight, face flushed. Then he walked off the stage. The audience erupted. The conference erupted into chaos after Richard left. Attendees clustered in groups, phones out, already tweeting and posting about the confrontation they'd just witnessed. The moderator looked shell-shocked. The other panelists sat frozen, unsure whether to continue or abandon ship. I stood, thanked the moderator, and walked off stage with as much dignity as I could manufacture while my hands were shaking. Melissa was waiting in the wings. Holy shit, she said. Too much? Perfect. She grabbed my face and kissed me hard. Absolutely perfect. My phone started buzzing immediately. "Call me! You're trending on LinkedIn!" Marcus Webb looking panicked somewhere in the crowd. But before I could process any of it, I saw him. Richard stood in the corridor outside the main conference hall, alone for perhaps the first time in his professional life. No admirers, no sycophants, just a man who'd walked off a stage and found no one following. "Go," Melissa said. "Finish it." I approached slowly. Richard saw me coming, straightened his shoulders, prepared for another battle. "David," he started. "I'm done fighting you," I said. "I just wanted you to know I don't hate you. I don't even think about you anymore, except when forced to. You spent 3 years trying to prove I wasn't worthy of your daughter, but the only thing you proved is that your approval was never worth having." His face hardened. "You think one good quarter makes you successful? One panel makes you my equal?" "No. Success doesn't make me your equal, Richard. Success makes me better than you. Because I built something without destroying anyone. I led without manipulating. I succeeded without needing to make others fail." "Melissa will come back," he said, desperate now. "When the novelty wears off, when real life sets in, she'll remember where she came from." "She already remembers. That's why she left." I turned to walk away, then stopped. "By the way, you asked me to start counting. 1 month until I came crawling back. Well, I'm starting a different count now. Counting forward. Counting the days I spend building instead of proving. Creating instead of defending. Living instead of surviving." "David, you're not part of that count, Richard. You never were." I left him standing there. 3 months later, Melissa and I stood in our newly furnished apartment, real furniture now, pieces we'd chosen together. She'd been promoted to lead consultant. My department had exceeded every metric, expanded to 12 people, and had been featured in 3 industry publications. "Any regrets?" she asked. Curled against me on our couch. "Not one. Not even the public confrontation. That's going to follow you forever. 10 close. This stayed. She be wanting. 4 of dumming." End quote. Good. Let it. Let everyone know. I'm not afraid of Richard Kane anymore. Kane. End quote. End quote. It is end quote. Fively send. End quote. End quote. End quote. End quote. Willa Medical Brown. End quote. End quote. End quote. Richard Kane. End quote. End quote. My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know. "Saw your panel in Chicago. Just left a toxic executive position because of it. Thank you for showing what's possible." I showed Melissa. "You did that," she said. "We did that. Together." Outside, Denver glowed. Inside, we were home. The counting continued. But now we were counting days of happiness instead of deadlines. Counting victories instead of fears. Counting the life we'd built from the ashes of the one that tried to destroy us. Richard Kane had given us 1 month. We'd taken forever.